Me and Paul have no problems chatting it up.
If I look, it's still super fuzzy.
Yeah, they're saying blur. They're saying you look blurry,
Yeah, let me.
like a blurry creature.
Well, I'm live on my channel now as well, so they can hear and see us now. But yeah, carry on where we left off. We were talking about a post office in the Philippines.
Oh yeah, so as we were doing the pre-chat, we were talking about these buildings that should not exist in certain places, and there's this crazy post office in Manila in the Philippines, and interestingly enough, it caught fire this summer, and the place just looks so out of place. I mean, I was saying before, I was like, yesterday, I was just having a little experiment, and I was just picking random countries that I didn't think had a lot of money, and I was looking up old world buildings in them. And obviously, the Philippines came instantly to my mind because I've heard Manila has some crazy structures.
Yeah, like I said, we find it no matter where you look, even like you were saying, surprisingly poor countries. Countries that are supposedly just coming out of the third world, even, or just below us in the rankings, type of thing, in terms of like wealth. But you wouldn't think that from the actual buildings that were in some of these places. Like I'm showing on the screen now for my viewers, this images of this Parthenon. Is that what you call it? A Parthenon? It's like a multi-pillared rectangled building.
Yeah, very similar.
Yeah, yeah, and it's huge, and it's such odd Romanesque like revival architecture for what should be, well, not. It should not be there. There's no reason for this style of architecture to be
Well,
here. Yeah.
what's the deal? Like, I mean, I don't. The post office near me, we've got a lot of people where we live. The post office they got multiple small ones. They don't have this giant one that looks like a king would live there.
No.
I mean, that literally looks like something you'd expect for like Caesar Augustus to have as his castle or where is his temple.
Yeah, or some kind of like embassy or something, or you think you'd give it like a higher status than a post office, a place to organize letters, but yeah, it seems to be the case though. Like I said, even coming out of the 1800s, which is really common in this theory, you see these beautiful townhouses and these stately homes that have been repurposed to be insane asylums. And it's like, how many insane people do you need to fill these huge stately homes over and over again? And I think they've run out of ideas to do with these buildings, to be honest.
Oh, you're looking better, Vitaly, but you need to close out that other tab because it looks like you got it open.
Yeah, I'm doing it right now. 1 second.
Yeah. So what was another one? I think that in like you're talking about that. There was I want to say there's a prison in, I think maybe in Des Moines, Iowa, somewhere around, and it looks like a castle. I mean, like it looks like a legit castle, and you're thinking like, why would anybody spend that much money for a prison? I mean, it's not even like it's not like it's in the center of a city. It's like outside the city.
Mm-hmm.
So like it's you put those kind of things away, like you don't want people to see them. But for some reason, they decided back in those days, I guess money just grew on trees, and they could just build whatever at whatever cost and for what.
Well, that's what they tell us, and they tell us then the Depression era came and people lost all the money, and then they couldn't build these things anymore, and things then fell into disrepair. Let's say, because in the UK we have like stately homes, for like rich, wealthy families that kind of get passed down, through the generations, and they just fall more and more into disrepair. They can afford to keep the upkeep of these things less and less. And then it seems like the government just buys them and then demolishes them. And it seems to be the way it's going. Like there used to be hundreds of these, thousands of them all across the UK. And they were used as like hubs for like wealthy families to have a lot of people working in there. They were a place that generated a lot of wealth for the community. And now they're just gone. And the few that we do have been maybe repurposed into a hotel or something like that. And the few and far in between. But these look magnificent, at one point. And the ones that we still have, luckily, do. But they're a rare commodity now. I'd say that.
So Vitaly, before I was telling Paul that I said, have you seen the Snyder cut of the Justice League? Because we were kind of talking about some Lichtenberg figure stuff.
The Snyder cut?
Yeah, the Justice League movie.
Oh no.
I said there's interesting. It's like they have a very like kind of antediluvian battle at the beginning of it, and I think Darkseid is a very similar character in the DC to Thanos. So like think like he he's literally represented the exact same way, where he's just coming to destroy and basically make our world like his. And so he's like fighting the Atlanteans, the Amazons. He's fighting like Zeus and Ares, and all the old pantheon of gods. He's fighting them. So he comes in, and he comes in a spaceship. So he comes down, and when he comes down, he has like this weapon, and he literally strikes the ground with it, and it just blows up like a big old figure where like all this fire shoots out. I said I was looking at that today, and I said I instantly thought of the whole melted the melted buildings and melted rocks.
Yeah, the electrical star patterns and stuff.
You got to see that.
Yeah. So, where did you guys start off at? Because do I look good right now?
You're still
Like,
a bit blurry, but maybe we'll clean it up in post production at this point.
Yeah.
We'll get AI to do it.
Yeah.
So we were just kind of rapping about just the old world building stuff, because I said I went on some like yesterday. I had a comment talking about old world buildings in Brazil that, again, they like somebody who lives there and says they don't belong. They don't have enough money to build these things.
Victorian era.
And then I was just going down the list of like just picking random countries in South America, and the poorest of the like countries like Bolivia have like insane buildings there. Like makes no sense. And what's interesting is like the mainstream narrative about these buildings, they would say that, well, colonialization, that's how they got built. But actually, if you look at when these buildings were supposedly built, they were built after like the Spanish lost control of these countries. And if you think about it, well, what place has been more colonized than the United States of America? How come we got less buildings like that than they do in South America, in Mexico?
Like I said, I was theorizing with you, wasn't I? That, well, maybe they can't actually afford to get rid of them, and because they actually need them to live in and to use for the purpose of using them. But in our countries, in the richer, wealthier countries, there's like an agenda to annihilate as many as possible and rebuild with metal and steel and just weak structures that are not permanent at all. But maybe in these poorer countries, they can't really afford to get rid of them. They can't afford to build anything else in its stead. Maybe that's all it really is, really. And
that makes sense to me. I mean, if you think about like the places that really got bombed out, like during like the world wars, they were countries wealthy enough typically that could rebuild.
Yeah, like Dresden, for example.
Where are they saying built these in Brazil and stuff? Is that after the Spanish left, or?
Well, I guess that's the thing, is like I'm not sure what I mean, I kind of just looked into it because that was one of the people who just had the normie take. It's like, oh, well, obviously this is colonization. That's an example of it. But I think they said that the Spanish were all like basically kicked out of all but like I think Cuba and I'm not sure the other country, but it was another small island like in like the 1820s. And they said if you look at a lot of the buildings that have this kind of look, a lot of them were built supposedly like right around like the 1890s or like the early 20th century. So they wouldn't have had the money to do it. And again, like if the Spanish were on the way out, why would they invest putting something like that there? Why would they invest putting that there anyways?
Maybe they just love living in lavish castles no matter where they go, and they just have to build them no matter what. They got accustomed to a lifestyle, in Portugal and Spain. I mean, even Portugal and Spain, I'm sure, has swaths of the same architecture as well. Probably more so.
Yeah.
So on the topic.
Oh, go ahead.
On the topic of the Millennial Kingdom, I'm kind of curious where you guys found out about it.
That's what I was saying. I was interesting that I said, obviously, as my content stuff has grown around, like just the almost the little places I've jumped to make different videos. Just when I first got on TikTok, I think the two subjects that probably got me here was I started doing like architecture stuff. I started like weird, like crazy buildings that make no sense to me, and I was just like, what is this? What is this building doing here? And this is not talking about like the tartaria stuff. It was just more like Art Deco things that are just like, wow, they really built that in the 20s. It makes no sense. And then I did that video about the Hoover Dam. And then as I was doing Hoover Dam stuff, everyone was talking about, oh, well, the Colorado River is really the Euphrates or something like that. And then you start going down the rabbit hole of the Grand
Mhm.
Canyon. And the Grand Canyon talks about either like there's either Hindu stuff in there or Egyptian stuff, depending on who you ask. And that's when I think I started looking in at like the rocks and the stuff that looks like I said, the stuff out west that looks like something told me instantly, wow, something bad happened here at some point. Either this was like, you know, the Nephilim fighting with nuclear weapons or something like that, or like literally the wrath of God got poured down on this place. And then I think eventually people were talking about the Tartaria stuff enough. And I was reading my Bible, waking up at the same time saying, I think the Daniel stuff has already happened. Then I see your videos about the melted rocks, the stuff about Egypt. I think I saw your video about that California being possibly being the original promised land, because
Yeah.
like those videos that you showed that California was an island, that really kind of like disturbed me. Like how are there real maps about that? And then what isn't it is it Death Valley is below sea level?
Yeah, Death Valley, the Mojave Desert, that whole area is way below sea level.
So it's
And
likely
apparently
so likely was an island.
so scientists are saying, again, slapping on the label of millions and billions of years ago, there used to be a shallow ocean, is what they were saying. But of course, it could have been a lot more recent. That there was some kind of river, but it dried up because of some kind of cataclysm.
Yeah, so I think it
Or
was
not a river.
so I think a lot of this was just like it was the confluence of all these things that I felt like were random pieces. And then
Mhm.
you're like, that's weird. That's real weird. That's real weird. And then you're like, it was kind of just like click, click, click. They all just went together. And I'm like, wait a minute. Now this makes too much sense to turn away. And then I think after that, it was like almost like I think after the first podcast we did together, I was already up kind of like going that way. But I think
Mhm.
when you really start looking at the scriptures, and I pulled out some more, all this generation scriptures from Jesus, it's like that's why I said I feel like that's the strongest case that we have that Jesus already came back, because he was saying over and over again that he was about to come back.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, how much more obvious can it get?
I agree. For me, it was very similar, to be honest. And to be honest, advice that a lot of your work was involved with me also getting a better grips and understanding about just how far we could have been lied to about geography, let alone history. And that kind of
Mhm.
fit a lot of things into place for me as well. Because I'd always been a fan of just looking at Google Earth and just zooming in on places and seeing what it's like in different climates and areas. And I've always
Mhm.
wondered what the hell happened in northern Siberia, because it's just a wasteland of
Mhm.
holes. It looks like it's been carpet bombed over a 2,000-mile radius
Mm.
going all the way across the northern strip, and it's just water's just filled the holes everywhere. And but you look at them when the Tartarian research began to appear, maybe about 4 years ago, and everyone was talking about Fomenko's work and how there's this ancient civilization of super advanced ether pulling people who were using these amazing buildings to power this amazing world, and it's all been suppressed, and it's all in Russia, and this Tartarian Empire was centered in the Siberian Russia area. That's when I started to wonder, okay, so something happened here, because I'm told from all these old maps there was a lot of people living in this area once, and now there's nothing at all. Like it's barren wasteland. It's a tundra at best. There's maybe the
Mhm.
odd pocket of tribes here and there, perhaps, but these maps are showing cathedrals built in these places and cities, and where have they gone? And that was always in the back of my mind. I could never let that go in the Tartaria stuff. But then in the midst of all that research, because on my channel that's what I do, I try and understand these theories that appear, these big ideas that keep coming along. It was like flat Earth, Mandela effect, then Tartaria. So I kind of had to sink my teeth into it. As a Christian, I was never satisfied with the answer. It doesn't square biblically, really. The whole Tartarian stuff.
Mm.
And it
Mm.
also there are issues with the Tartarian narrative as well, which don't quite make sense as well, and it just never quite sat right with me. Something about it was off.
Mhm.
And then exploring Tartaria made this video about 3 years ago, and you could tell she was just thinking out loud, and she was just saying, what if the saints have already been here, just looking at all these Catholic churches, and what if the timeline's wrong, and What if we're in the little season? And then I was like, bam! I had to spend like 3 years just thinking about that, and that's what I've been doing. Before I came back at the start of the year, while I was still a manager at a supermarket, I was spending most of my lunch sat in my car just listening to people talk about this concept that history is a complete lie, and what if it's the biblical narrative? What if that's really what's going on? And there's many people who have been doing far better work for longer than I have, and it just got to the point where it's like, I can't leave this. This cannot be left alone. This is answering way too many questions. Far too much is fitting into place with this one concept, and it's an answer. It's a Christian, biblically grounded answer for the Tartarian question. And I just started talking about it maybe like 3 months ago. So you guys are, Vital, you're way ahead of me on this one, and a lot of your work is what's really helped me as well. And I don't know why people don't want to listen to me talk about it. I'm just a rambling fool in comparison, But I just can't leave it,
Where do you think that name came from? Tartaria. Some people were saying comes from the word Tartarus, like the underworld, and that it's a fallen angel kingdom or something like that, because of all
Yeah.
the statues of gods and angels. And they were saying that at one point there was some kind of satanic fallen angel kingdom all over the world.
I can
That was
believe that.
one theory somebody
I can believe that. I was talking about it in one of my recent lives. I was on a podcast just discussing this idea. And, everyone talks about Daniel 7, the prophecy in Daniel 7 is like a rehash of the prophecy in Daniel 2 about the statue with the gold head, the silver, and the bronze, and then the iron mixed with clay, and these empires that would come. And typically it's understood, isn't it? It's, I'm going blank here. It's Babylon, then it's Persia, then it's Greece, and then it's Rome, right? These are the four kingdoms, the four beasts that will come. Then I thought, do we have to kind of reinterpret this whole thing now in light of this Millennial Kingdom coming and going? Is there something else here, So I looked into Daniel 7, and there's a weird sentence in the middle. I think it's Daniel 7:12. And if I look at the narrative, it says, before Christ turns up, before tribulation, there are three kingdoms, and then a fourth one which is diverse and unlike any other kingdom. And let's say it is Rome, and they dominate the whole earth. Using your Pangea theory that the earth had no waters and was all connected was an easy thing to do. Unlike anything that came before, wasn't even given an animal as an analogy, just a beast. It was just called a beast with iron teeth and brass claws, Is it brass?
came out of the sea.
Yeah, it's just this monster with 10 horns and a little horn, which you could say was the Vatican. Other people theorize that's what it was talking about. And it was centered in Rome, dominated the whole earth, and built Romanesque structures, like in the Philippines, for example, these Parthenons that make no sense being there, and perhaps many, many, many amazing World's Fair looking buildings all over the place, all across the earth. But it says in Daniel 7 it's cut short because Christ returns. I'm summarizing here, I'm paraphrasing, but this is what the story is. Christ comes, cuts that kingdom short, and takes it off the people who built it and gives it to the saints. It says the saints get the kingdom. Now, people have always assumed that must mean they get to live with Christ in his kingdom when it comes. What if that's not what it's saying to us? What if it's saying literally Christ comes, takes it off the kings, the leaders of Rome, and gives it to the saints, his new resurrected saints, and they get to take over these buildings for the 1,000-year reign and be ministers on the earth, the right-hand men of God, of Jesus himself, who's specifically ruling from his beloved city. So that's what I'm thinking. Well, he also says then afterwards, those people have the kingdom taken away from them, and then they have to live for a long time. Their lives are extended. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, we know during the millennial reign, people have longer lifespans. Because Christ is present on earth, we can theorize why this is. Is it because just his pure presence, being the light of the world, is just making people live longer just by virtue of him being here? And obviously you have the living waters, and the, let's say, healing energies in these cathedrals, maybe, or whatever reason people are living longer. It seems like the people that had their kingdoms taken away from them and given to the saints had to live through it. They had to live through the entire millennial reign knowing they've lost everything,
Paul, I got something good. It's funny because I was looking at this generation verses, and this, I think this relates pretty well. So I said, So this is Luke chapter 20, and this is the ESV, and it's starting with verse 9, and it says, and he began to tell this parable. A man planted a vineyard and let it out to the tenants and went into a country for a long while. When the time came, he sent a servant to the tenants so that they would give him some of the fruit of the vineyard. but the tenants beat him and sent him away empty-handed. He sent another servant, but they beat him and treated him shamefully and sent him away empty-handed. He sent yet a third. This one he also wounded and cast out. Then the owner of the vineyard said, "What shall I do? I will send my beloved son. Perhaps they will respect him." But when the tenants saw him, they said to themselves, "This is the heir. Let us kill him so that inheritance may be ours." Then they threw him out of the vineyard and killed him. What then will the owner of the vineyard do to them? He will come and destroy those tenants, and give the vineyard to others. When they heard this, they said, "Surely not." But he looked directly at them and says, "What then is this written? The stone that the builders rejected has become the cornerstone, and everyone who falls on that stone will be broken to pieces, and when it falls on anyone, it will crush them." So
There
literally,
you
it's
go.
about like they weren't being fruitful, and it's like obviously it's like talking right to these people,
Hmm.
and they killed. Obviously the people. It's interesting that I said it's so funny to think that like Jesus isn't being literal when it's like literally God sends his son to these people, they reject him and kill him, and you kind of expect God to react this way
Yeah,
by
well,
doing what they did.
but the interesting thing about Daniel, that's the perfect. It's the same story. God
Mhm.
comes, takes everything off them, and gives it to his people. So gives it to the saints. So maybe
Mhm.
that is an answer for why we have this worldwide cultural architectural style everywhere. It was the kingdom built by this fourth beast initially, unlike anything else before, and it was the buildings were repurposed, given over to the saints. And obviously I imagine Christ would also have built his own kingdom around it too, and his own structures. Perhaps the Gothic cathedrals are his handiwork. I've heard Noel Hadley saying something like that. And maybe more was built upon it, but maybe the infrastructure was just taken away. And perhaps when the little season began, those people who lived through the entire reign with extended lives and took the kingdom back straight away, took it back, and then started to destroy what they built to erase history and reset everything as we know. 'Cause that's what when I read Daniel again, that seemed to be the story because it does mention, that once Satan's released, he would seek to change times, and
Mhm.
everything, and this is what we're talking. Perhaps this is what we're really talking about. People always maybe attached that was just changing the calendar. That was just changing the day of the Sabbath, for example, and always equating it to the Vatican doing these things. But maybe that is true still, because we still have the Vatican today, which is doing a lot of dodgy things as well. But in light of this new theory, it just is it's enlightening. It kind of sheds a more literal sense to the word than simply just parable. It's kind of I don't know. I've talked enough. I'll let you guys go. But no.
So what? Wait. So Vitaly, though, obviously, since you seem like you're the OG when it comes to talking about this stuff, since you've been doing it for about 2 years, like, so what finally got you on board that this likely happened?
The channel Conspiracy R Us actually got me on board. There's a video he made on the Millennial Kingdom, and that just got my mental gears going. And I'm like, all right, I'm gonna try to find out everything I possibly can about this. And that's kind of where it started. But that video has been taken down. I can't find it on his channel anymore. So that's kind of
Interesting.
what got me started. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it
So
got me to read the Bible
yeah.
completely, like especially verses that involve Jesus talking to the disciples or anyone about end times. And every
Mhm.
time he says this generation, this people. And I'm like, how else can I understand this unless I take it as is, right? Unless I trust the word versus having somebody interpret it for me. Oh, it doesn't say that. This generation means that. I'm like, it probably would have said that, like would have said something else specifically.
Yeah, it's almost like when he was saying in Matthew 16 when he says, "Some of you will not taste death before until you see the Son of Man come in his kingdom." It's like, oh, he's talking about John. It's like, well, then why did he say some? Like,
Yeah.
why didn't he say one of you? When you see it in a vision, you know, and I'll give you the vision, but not actually physically see it. And then again, I said I always go back to John chapter 1, verse 48. I think when he's telling Nathaniel that you're going to see greater things than this. You'll see heaven opened up with the Son of Man coming down with angels ascending and descending on him. So it's like he specifically tells Nathaniel, you're going to see this. And then in everybody else's interpretation, they don't mention him because they don't mention him at the
Mhm.
transfiguration. He's obviously didn't write Revelation. So it's kind of like then the cop out would be, well, he saw it when he died after he died, but that's really not
It
really
didn't
it
specifically say.
loses a lot of
Yeah.
impact if he was dead.
Yeah, I mean, like, that's a question people should ask themselves when you read the Bible. Like, if you read something and your instinct is to think the exact opposite, you should ask yourself why. Why are you thinking this? Is it because what you learned in church or what you've been told or some other reason, right? Like when I read this generation now, I'm like, I'm just reading it like a kid, as the Bible says, right? Like a little baby or a toddler just reading, or a kid. And I'm like, this generation, simple as that's the people he's talking to.
Yeah, I think once you're willing to accept that this could be, it's like it is amazing like that you miss so many times because like there's obviously been verses like that one in Matthew 16 that people have questioned
Mhm.
and there's these answers, but when you actually put all the verses together, it's like then you're just like, how did I miss all the other ones? Because there's so many that are there. Actually, I was actually just reading something up because I had a buddy of mine ask me about when Revelation was written. Because before I ever got to this position, I think a lot of people fall back on the Revelation was written until 95 AD. So that would put it way past when the temple was destroyed, and therefore all these events are past then. Well, you realize like when you actually look into it, let's just say that's far from a fact. Like it's I don't
Mhm.
it's debated by a lot. And I think it was what is it? There's the earliest Bible was like the Syriac, I believe is it called. It literally mentions that Nero is the one who put John on Patmos. I think that's like a second century like binding of the Bible, and it literally mentions that in like I guess the prologue to Revelation that Nero put him there.
Mhm.
And then when you see that, I was looking at Revelation chapter 11 when I used to think that when he was measuring a temple, he was measuring like Ezekiel was when there was no temple there. But it also tells them to mention those who were in the temple. So it's kind of like, well, he's telling them to go use a measuring rod to measure the temple and then the people who are in it. So then he says, obviously, don't measure the courtyard because the Gentiles are going to be allowed to trample on it.
Mhm.
And you're like, well, now that sounds like it has a whole different vibe when you think maybe he wrote this in like 68, maybe 65, and then the temple is destroyed in 70.
Hmm. On that, just to get your guys' opinion. So people say, well, who was the Antichrist then? And we can say, okay, maybe it was Nero. And the
Hmm.
time, like you said, the timeline we've been told is way off, maybe by about let's say 30 years or something there, give or take. So who was the false prophet then in that respect? Who was the one that gave power? Like, can we try and figure out who these characters are? Because I was talking to Tony from God Rules channel about this, and he's like, his mind's just exploding with ideas right now. I think he's only just got into it for the first time, and he just wanted to talk with somebody about
Hmm.
it. And he was talking about the early church history, and I think he was going to like something like 400 AD in these time periods. And he was talking about a pope called was it Pope Sixtus the Third or something like that, and the things that guy got up to seem very sketchy and dodgy and insane and very antichrist in pure nature. You know what I mean? Very false prophet. I think he was embroiled in a lot of like sexual scandal and all these types of things. And you think about the name Sixtus the Third, three sixes. It's just an odd choice of title that someone would risk giving themselves as an early church leader as well. All of it just seems very strange to me. And I suppose the only way I could square this is, was that perhaps the false leadership of the church during the time of Nero, but we're just told they're separated by like 300 years or something? Because how are we supposed to clarify this for ourselves? And what do you guys make of this? Like, do you have any theories or ideas on how we can kind of square that early church period? Is that 500 years before the collapse of Rome supposedly real? Or did it all happen in like 50 years or something and they've just spread it out over 500 years in our history books? Like, do you have any takes on that?
I think the collapse of Rome was the Armageddon events. All the buildings, just the whole all of society, along with a bunch of other societies throughout the world or civilizations.
What's
Because
I
interesting is it did they I saw that I was looking this up the other day is that they actually date like the destruction of Pompeii by volcano to 79 AD. So I mean
perfect timing, yeah.
that's pretty close to like this corrupt Roman city is literally burned up with fire and people are
Mhm.
like
Mhm.
what like petrified.
Because it's interesting. Noel was showing the historical records for the worst year on history was like 541 AD or something like that. And it was just 7 years of hell on Earth. Like pure, just the sun was out, plagues everywhere, people just dropping dead. He's describing it as like there's just so many bodies everywhere. People have just given up. They're not burying the dead anymore. They're just pushing them off cliffs into the
Ugh.
sea en masse, and it's
Too
just
many
one
dead
collapse
bodies.
after. Yeah, and this is where we get the Grim Reaper from. Actually, he tells a very fascinating story that people were terrified to answer their doors because people are having visions of demons before they die. So they didn't want to open the door to the Grim Reaper knocking because if they see the demon, they know their time's up and they're going to die not long after seeing them. And everybody who was dying was claiming that this thing came to me and told me your time's up. You know what I mean? So this is
Mm.
the idea of, the Grim Reaper coming and knocking on the door type of, that's where we get that symbol from. And it was just chaos. It was just earthquakes, destruction, things burning everywhere. But he says there were historians around at the time who was telling people this isn't tribulation. And everyone was like, "Are you joking? You can clearly see this is it. This is the judgment." And they're like, "No, no, 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 no. Don't listen to those guys. That's crazy talk." It's like the sun isn't shining, and it's like the idea was every volcano had gone off, everything. It was just destruction, pure destruction, as a tribulation event would be.
What else could it be?
That's
Yeah.
that's like the meme of the dog sitting in the room with it on fire.
He's on fire.
This is fine.
Yeah.
No, this is totally not the tribulation, guys. Don't worry.
But the theory goes that was an attempt. These documenters of history during that time are the ones writing history for a future generation to look back on, so they could question it and cover up. Maybe basically agents of Satan, let's say in a literal sense, writing the histories they know people are going to find after the Millennial Reign, so that they're controlling the narrative then for the future generations to find. So I don't know, but again, that's supposed to happen in 541. That's far away from 70 AD.
Vitaly, did you have an answer for who could possibly been the false prophet?
I haven't looked very much into this. No.
I was actually the first thing that came to my mind was, if you remember in the book of Acts, there's Simon the sorcerer. He's like, and I didn't see this until recently that I connected. He's actually known to be the father of Gnosticism. So it's kind of like that character where it's like obviously Gnosticism being a complete inversion of the truth, literally, attributing as the good, like the good guy is the serpent. It's like, I mean, I don't know how much influence he had. You know what I find interesting about the book of Revelation is everyone's like the Antichrist, and it's like that word's not in the Revelation. Have you ever noticed that? Like that's curiously absent from the book of Revelation. And John writes in First John about the spirit of Antichrist, but he never once mentions that word. So you get beast, and so like, but beast is easily, could in many ways seems like synonymous with the empire is the beast. And like the false prophet is like a man, but it's like obviously they both get thrown in like a fire. So it is confusing where it's like, I know that Paul talks about the son of perdition. But again, like I guess obviously Nero seems obviously the most likely to be him because like literally the gematria of his name is 666. But the false prophet character is like, that's, I guess, through this lens, trying to revisit these things and who could tie him in. But again, like I think as Vitaly and you guys were saying, that is it possible that these events were all more combined and then they're spread out over the timeline so they don't look as it's not as suspicious because you can't make it equal 1-to-1. Well, this is this is that, and then
all these events are just split up completely.
Tied up in a bow and say, well, that's a wrap.
Yeah. You know what else is interesting? You know how the Bible mentions the word like 1/3, like 1/3 of sea life gets destroyed, right? 1/3 of the world gets burned. So I looked into all of that, and apparently 1/3 of sea life did go extinct, according to scientists, millions of years ago. Again, with that label, right? And then 1/3 of the earth is covered in deserts. That some subscriber mentioned that to me, so I'm like, interesting.
Well, weren't you even saying that there wasn't there about a third of the earth or some? I know what you're saying. What's the dark earth?
Oh yeah, the dark earth. Yeah, so like I believe about 1/3 of the earth is covered in this material that can only be formed from extreme heat and biological matter.
Right.
And it's found all over the Amazon, near all those pyramids, and I believe in England as well. It's all over Europe, Rome especially. So it's just like really dark, fertile soil.
Yeah, I think Conspiracy Arrow's made a lot of work on that. Actually, it's all ringing bells to me when you bring it up.
Usually looking at the pyramids over in like South America, and a lot of these places being like in this dense jungle. But then just overall, like, so it didn't look like that when they were building that, because there's no way they were going through that thick jungle that you can't even hardly
No.
just walk through. It didn't look like that when they built that. But what's also interesting is like, where are all the really old trees like in the world? Like, isn't that kind of real suspect? Because you think like trees would just continue to grow, right? If you just let them.
You should be careful
But
talking about that.
Yeah.
I've mentioned it on my channel before, and I just made a video. But do you remember the phenomena video from some Russian guy called "There's no trees on flat Earth" or something like
Yeah,
that?
yeah, I
Do you
remember.
remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was about maybe 4 years
It's
ago, wasn't it? And it was huge, and it was
yeah.
just a precursor before the Tartarian stuff started to appear. This video came out and took the conspiracy world by storm. And he was basically saying the whole world looks like it's been mined. Like we're living on the wastelands of a huge mining project, and all the
mm-hmm.
trees were cut down. And the trees we have are like moss in comparison to what the trees truly once were. You know, these mountain,
Grass.
yeah, we have these mountain plateaus which are actually just a stump, basically.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
But he made the point that most of the trees that we do have are like 500 years old max,
Right.
really. And I brought this up in passing in my Millennial Kingdom video, the very first one I made. I was like, and another point as well, why are the trees so young? Like, they're not actually that old. Maybe no more than, I said something stupid like maybe no more than 200 and 300 years old, just not thinking about what I was saying. And people were like, well, actually, and there are trees which are over 2,000 years old in California and all these type of things. And there's the trees
mm-hmm.
in that are 5,000 years old in the Middle East. And it's like, okay. So I looked into it and I went onto the Wikipedia, and they're actually all the oldest trees that are like 1,000 years old and more. They're actually like monuments with plaques, and they're actually placed on
Right.
on Google Maps. And my argument back to this is, okay, so there's a list here of 50 trees that maybe go over 500 years old. That's not
Mm-hmm.
enough. How do you know how big the Earth is? That's not
Right.
enough big old trees for how long we've been here. The majority, 99.9999999% recurring of the trees on Earth, are like 500 years old. So something happened which has removed or stopped the old tree. And get this, the old trees we do have, they are battered. You could barely call them trees. They are husks of trees, but they're still calling them trees today. Yeah, we have these really old trees in the Middle East, which are just it's called Methuselah. It's that old, you know. But
Oh.
you look at it, and it's so haggard. It's been through a flood or two. It's been
The butt
through a couple
survived the
of
butt flood.
it's been through a couple of destructive events, you can tell, and it made it through by the skin of its teeth, maybe, you know. But
Mhm.
that's my rebuttal to that argument, because I know people are going to be in the chat, like the comments, saying
I want
we do have old trees, you know. But go ahead, sorry.
I want to say that there is the oldest tree maybe in America. Obviously, it's somewhere like maybe like in the redwoods over in California, and just much like the Grand Canyon, which is off limits to the public. Like this where this tree is now, like for whatever reason, you're not allowed to go there either.
Hmm.
And it's like, again, so like it's a little kind of sus. They're like, why can't I go see this old tree? Yeah, and again, like where are their brother trees? Where's their relatives? I mean, that I just think it's strange. Actually, I got a question for you guys, and if you guys have looked into this, does anybody is anybody in like the mainstream ever touching the idea like why those pictures from the 1800s there's mud everywhere, and why that the buildings like are buried, up over the windows in many cases? Like, does anybody have a like what is the mainstream take of that, or do they even touch that topic at all?
I've seen one explanation in that they built the buildings first and then the sidewalks. So I don't know. Then the roads around.
Uh,
I assume they, because this is odd. I mean, I implore anybody who's listening to do this to their own local little village, in their own little town, wherever they live. Just try and get some old photos of some of the oldest buildings there, and you'll find, even in mine, there's this really. It was a school that I went to. So when you're like the age of like 3 to like 5 to 7 or something, you go to this thing called reception years 1 and 2, and it was a boy girl school. It had a boys entrance and a girls entrance, and made out of stone. And I
mhm.
found some old photos of it, and it was probably wasn't used as a school originally because it was covered in antiquitech. Like it had antennas and spikes on it that it did not have when I was there. But it's just in a barren field. Not even field, it looks like mud. It just looks like flattened land. It's in the middle of nowhere. Right now, it's fully built up. It's a fully built up area with roads, houses surrounding it, and everything. It just got demolished 2 years ago. And it's gone now. New build houses have been built upon the estate. But that's been there since like 1809 or something like that. And these early, like, I don't know, these early photos you have of it, there's a literally, and this is in a tiny little northwestern town, it's just some guy with a top hat stood in front of this building
Right,
with a cane, and it's just mud. It's just brown around him, flat land, and it's kind of, I don't
Did
think
he have his hand in his
yeah,
pocket like that?
probably.
Like, I totally didn't have anything to do with this.
Probably, yeah, maybe he's the guy who found it, founded it maybe or established it or something. But I don't think they give you an explanation. I don't think they need to. I think they assume that people today will think, well, they didn't have much money to build much back then. Everything was just empty land, and that's all it is. It's just they didn't need pavements then or paths. It's just too much money,
Well,
But
that's what I'm saying. And I said I'm telling you right now, if you're not on board with this theory that's some kind of remnants of the millennial reign, I implore you have to come up with an alternative explanation, because I think that it's just too weird. I watched that somebody DM'd me the hidden history of flat Earth, and I was watching that 5-hour thing, and I was like blown away. It starts off just showing like pictures from like the 1850s of like Dresden and these cities in Germany and cities in Russia. And it is so eerie seeing these massive cities and there's no one around. There's mud on the ground. And again, like, I think that probably people who don't know what they're looking at would say, oh, well, they didn't have regular roads. It's like, obviously they had regular roads. The Romans built roads. So like they wouldn't, you think they'd be walking into those buildings with muddy boots? Not on purpose. So like obviously, and eventually it was like you see lots of pictures of the 1800s and they're literally digging things out. Or like I saw pictures of them digging railroad tracks up. The railroad tracks were under the ground. And so to me, it's like, if you don't have a explanation for that, I mean, like I said, you have to have one, because I think that to me, it's like, that's proof that they're lying, that they don't even talk about it. Because because nothing would sound acceptable. So they just don't talk about it. And so to me, it's like, okay, so that's proof that they're lying about something. And based on what we're looking at, it's huge. Because I think that was the point that the Erwan, I guess however you say his name was, he made a point to say, anybody who's taking pictures, there's intention behind the camera. So when you see a picture of this very creepy looking place with no one in it, maybe that was the intention of the picture, is to say, hey, look at this giant metropolitan area and there is not one soul in sight. And they're like, you have it in like San Francisco, you have it, in all these cities in Europe. And then I think there's a few places like, I think maybe London and like Paris, there's people. But then it's not for like 50 years later, do you see these same kinds of places and there's people. And then they're like these aristocrats who clearly they don't have tools. They're not going to build more buildings. They look like they're tourists in these places. It makes, like I said, it makes no sense. Just the visual. There's something striking about it to me.
No, I agree. I absolutely agree. One explanation I have heard to explain why there are no people in the photographs, just playing devil's advocate here, is that photographs then, they couldn't pick up people who were moving. You had to be still and let it expose for a little bit first and then close the exposure. And in that time it's open. If anyone's moving, it doesn't exist. You have to stay perfectly still to register on the image. But as a photographer who has dealt with things like that, you would see trails. They wouldn't just be, and out of crowds of people, there's always somebody who stood still somewhere. So they would have appeared. It doesn't. So I that's not a satisfying answer for me. But just for somebody who did want to bring that up as an excuse.
And also, like I said, you have contemporary pictures at the same time where he was showing like, here's Paris, here's London, and there's people around, and they're not all blurry and it looks normal. So it still looks weird though.
It does. What do you think happened then? Let's go to the Millennial Kingdom theory here then. Why did these cities just become empty like that? Like, do we have an answer? Does anyone have a theory on that exactly? Like, was everybody a resurrected saint that went to the beloved city after the end of the reign, so that everyone just disappeared at once? Or was, I don't know. How do we explain this? Like, do we have an answer?
What do you got, Vitaly? Do you have an answer for that one?
I believe in the book of Zechariah, it said that not everybody that lives during the reign is a saint, right?
Mhm.
There are nations that have to make pilgrimage to the New Jerusalem
Yeah.
yearly. If they don't, it says in the Bible that God wouldn't even let rain upon them. Basically, that's how they would be punished. No rain would even fall upon you.
Mhm.
And I think when the Millennial Kingdom ended, the people that were part of the reign that weren't saints, I think they were still there, and the saints were always in their, in the New Jerusalem. I don't think they left. I think they traveled down below and back up in their airships or whatever they had for whatever theory anybody has about that. But that's what I think happened. And what's interesting about that concerning God not making it rain on nations that wouldn't make pilgrimage is there is a legend called the Kingdom of Magonia. You guys ever heard of that?
I've heard that name, but no.
So the first recorded mention of the city that we can find is from a French bishop, and he specifically wrote in his books that he denounces this. So essentially, it's a floating city. That's the legend, and this French bishop denounces Magonia and its weather magic, which is interesting, right?
Oh
The
wow.
New Jerusalem is a flying city, and it says in the book of Zechariah that God wouldn't even send rain upon the nations that don't come there. And here, this French bishop in the year 800 writes that the city of Magonia doesn't exist, and I denounce the weather magic that it has. And I'm like, wow, that literally matches up with the prophecies in Zechariah
Hmm.
about God not letting it rain on these nations and just the whole pilgrimage thing.
It's interesting you mentioned that because I was just looking at this the other day, like just a map of the Earth and where the deserts are, and they're not spread out as
Yeah, they're like a big band,
it's
like
not it's
right
not
around.
like a band though. You'd think it would be because we're told it's just supposed to be where the hottest point is on the equator,
Oh, yeah.
but
Mhm.
when you actually look at them on a map, it's chaos. It's chaos where these patches of desert just randomly are all over the actual thing, and you have to wonder, like, obviously a nation like Australia, for example, which is mainly all dry desert, barren
Yeah.
land.
Hmm.
Well, they have a
Mhm.
rich, long history of tribal, like, history. They have the dreaming, and they were heavily steeped in rainbow serpent worship and the offspring gods of that, and spirits, and communicating with spirits and demons. And they have a rich. It's like ingrained in their culture to be connected to demonic um, beings, basically in communication with them at all time. Is it possible that that nation never did leave those practices behind, even when Christ came? And you notice the only places in Australia that do have any greenery are the really built up cities just along the coasts. And
Hmm.
they're actually have Tartarian, in quotes, architecture everywhere. These beautiful buildings
Mhm.
everywhere where the Greenland is, but in the outback, in the Blue Mountains, in the red area, and Australia is huge, by the way, with like thousands of different tribes within them, and they've stayed the same relatively for thousands of years. They have the same verbal culture, and whether these nations just didn't make the pilgrimage, they just didn't give in with their religion and continue to do exactly what they always did, and it continues to today, and it's just a huge desert as a result, apart from certain little areas just around the edges. And you have to wonder, like, even today, where Islam is, for example, where it's predominant,
Mhm.
it's all
Yeah,
desert. It's
that
all
place. No.
desert. It's
Well, I
complete
mean, I think
desert. Yeah.
I think a lot of it is. I mean, there's specific biblical judgments that these places are called out by name, and like what does it say? Like in Isaiah and some of these the books of the prophets, and they say this place is going to be like a, appalling to anybody who walks by, and it's like, and that's literally what happened. I mentioned there is one. I think it's in Egypt, a place called is Zoan, and I think Zoan is what people believe to be the city of Tanis, which used to be the capital of Egypt. And that place is literally scorched up. They got like these giant megaliths that, like I said, literally looks like they've been tossed around. There's a foot that's like bigger than a person. And where's the rest of the statue? It's gone. But then there's big statues with like burn marks on them. And I think they tried to set the place back up a little bit, but like again, these are places that the Bible calls out by name, and there's really no good explanation why it's so wrecked other than straight wrath of God stuff.
Erosion.
Right. It was like, yeah, wind erosion and sand and stuff like that. No, but I want to take a crack at that question, Paul, because this is wild speculation by me, because I think that's pretty much all we've got at this point. If we believe that, like, obviously based on just having the earliest pictures we have, we know something went down around early 1800s, maybe late 1700s. And I think Vitali's got a working theory about 1776, which is the founding of America and the founding of the Illuminati. Could be something there. But it is, if Satan did get let loose, I mean, if you even think about like examples of like Satan in the book of Job, he was allowed to kill Job's whole family. Is it possible that when Satan got let out, it's like, again, how is he going to deceive all the nations? Well, maybe he did something to wreck lots of things in yeah, perhaps some of the saints at the end of the 1,000 years got caught up at some point to heaven. I'm not sure how that worked, but maybe literally the devil came to kill because he had to obviously remove witnesses from this place. And then I said, so what makes sense too is the fact that you have certain places that are obviously still have some people in it, but then you have the weird stuff about the orphan trains and the Cabbage Patch Kids and all this weird stuff going on about these fairs. And it does seem interesting that you have this effort to repopulate the place by taking orphans all around. Like I said, you think about the population of the world is, based on what they tell us, was very low in the 1800s. I think it was only like 1 billion or something like that, if that's true. Still like way smaller than now. So the amounts of orphans they're talking about all around the world, you like obviously you amplify that to the number we're at now, and you can't even imagine how many people we're talking about. So the orphans are going all around. And then you have, right at the same time, I said, it's interesting, I looked this up, was in 1900 in America, there was 1,000 insane asylums. Or no, there was 1,000 orphanages. There's 0 today. There's 0 orphanages. There was 1,000 of them. And obviously you think our population's way bigger now, so there should be maybe some. And then there was 150,000 people locked up in insane asylums in 1900. When if you think about 250,000 orphans in America, you have 150,000 people in insane asylums. Yeah, to me, it's like something obviously massive happened, and it could have been when Satan was let loose. And then you have the remnants of those people, was like the people who wouldn't shut up about it got locked up, their kids got taken away. And then these kids got shipped around all around obviously America, and probably all around the world to repopulate these places. It feels like, I mean, just based on the pictures, yeah, you see aristocrats. I mean, everybody's dressed so well. Everybody looks so good walking around. So these were like the people who said, well, we're not working in the factories. Let's go put those kids in there. And again, these kids are reprogrammed. Then you get right into like the Rockefeller school system that we've got. And anybody who talked about that stuff, obviously they locked away or offed. So, I mean, I think that it could be, there must have been some kind of obviously real shaking of this place. Like you could say, even as you were talking about the soil liquefaction, maybe when the devil was like literally physically let out, and then that's what happened.
All right, you remember that article I sent you concerning the saints and the insane asylums? So this is the Greensboro Patriot article, and it's from 1868, I believe. And there's a very interesting passage in this article, and this is what it says. It's highlighted in yellow right there. So I'm gonna send it to you, so maybe you could post it up here. But it says, lunatics had their golden age before laws were made, when they wandered forth at large and were revered as saints, or partaking of something holy or divine. But with laws and civilizations, their iron age began. What does that even mean? Like,
wait, read that again.
Read that again, yeah.
Right. So this article or newspaper is from the 1800s, like 1860s. Lunatics had their golden age before laws were made, when they wandered forth at large and were revered as saints, or partaking of something holy or divine. But with laws and civilization, their iron age began. So the lunatic they're referring to in this article is the insane asylum people. I don't know why they specifically said this in the article, but yeah, it's very weird. It's at the top of the title. It says the treatment of lunatics, and it just like goes into their treatment, I guess, and then it says that this weird passage right here.
Isn't it
That's
funny? Even
yeah.
I saw somebody was breaking down English words, and they were just talking about the fact that, like, lunatic, obviously it's some kind of related to the moon. It's kind of it's a strange word to call crazy people, but that's always like that expression where you're like, it must be a full moon. People are acting crazy. Like, where does that even like where does that come from? Isn't it interesting? I've heard people compare that, like, the sun and the moon are supposed to represent. The sun was, God put these these signs in it. The sun is to represent God's son. It's not literally God's son. It represents it, and the church is represented by the moon.
Yeah.
So it's like maybe that's where lunatic came from.
Maybe. I mean, that what you said there's interesting because wasn't Sigmund Freud around the same era, and he was
Yeah.
and I
Late
believe
18.
yeah, and I believe he was also again accusing people of going insane due to religious fervor. That was like the number one reason for putting people in insane asylums, religious insanery.
Delusions.
Yeah, and if you think about the timing, if these were people in these insane asylums, for example, in 1860, are still then being described as people who lived during a golden age, they claim, where everything was perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Are these people are they being locked up in insane asylums for long periods of time because they don't die easily because they lived through the millennial reign? Are they living a really 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 long time and are perhaps really hard to kill? So what do? You just lock them away until they finally just end whatever that is because Christ isn't there anymore. It's the little season. It
Yeah.
must wear off eventually, right? So it makes sense. Maybe that's what they did. They just got rid of them and their children obviously became the orphans, perhaps, in this
Mm-hmm.
scenario. And these kids were doing some pretty crazy things. They were like
Yeah.
chimney sweeps, working in factories, and like you have to wonder what
22-year-olds.
kind of child. My child cannot do something like that. You know what I mean? These kids must have been super children in some way, very hardy, like
Mm-hmm.
indestructible, and perhaps this is what we're seeing here. And obviously, since then, it's dissipated and watered down, and it's just not the same anymore. But I'm just trying to think because if that was in 1860 and it was 1776, let's say, we've got 100 years of life there, of people who
Mm-hmm.
still supposedly supposed to be living during this time, and it all kind of lines up to the narrative. Only religious nuts belong in the insane asylum. These
Well,
crazy people.
well, you could still even have some remnant of the people, and they're still telling their kids about it, and they're still
Yeah.
growing up, and they're still saying, "No,
Stories.
this is not right." Like what they're trying to tell people, it's not true.
Hmm.
And so yeah, so like obviously you could have a generation past that, but then the next generation, it's like the the kids of the parents who told them about all the things before, they're not going to say anything because they see what happens to people who do.
Hmm.
So people out of fear, obviously, to get locked up and go to shock therapy and all that stuff. Like,
Mm.
is it worth it to fight the narrative?
Probably not. I mean, it only takes what about 4 generations to completely erase history anyway, rewrite the
Probably
school
less.
books. Probably less. Yeah, probably maybe two or
Uh,
three, to be honest.
well, I saw a video. It was funny right before, like, kind of all the election stuff, funny business over like in the 2020s. Everyone was sharing this video of, I think, this guy. His name's Yuri something, and he was in the KJB, and he was like talking about like the threat of communism. And
Mm.
I think he was actually saying it only takes 15 years to program a
20.
generation.
20. Yeah,
Or,
Yuri
or so,
Bezmenov. I
oh
remember
yeah,
that.
oh yeah, because
I
because
remember.
he's basically just saying long enough to put him through school.
Hmm.
So like one generation, because he had these different phases of how to basically completely co-opt the thing, and obviously it's like the guy was. I don't think he necessarily was a prophet, but obviously he's saying these things in the 80s in
Hmm.
America, and you're like looking around, you're like, because he was kind of already saying back then it was too late, and
Yeah.
he was clearly right.
Hmm.
Crazy.
Because you have to just make sure the kids don't tell the parents what they learn in school. The parents will never would bother to check, and then the kids will probably go on believing a certain narrative, and then they have kids and tell their kids that narrative, believing it's true and it's done. And the parents will
It's
grow
that easy.
old. Yeah, it's that easy. It's terrifying. I mean, one interesting about that time period as well, the Odd Fellows, which is an offshoot of Freemasonry.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever looked at their seal, the seal of the Odd Fellows from the original? Let me see if
Mm.
I can't just get it up here and read it to you quickly.
I was looking up when we did our podcast. I was looking up their different logos, and there was a few of them that were like skulls and
Two women
yeah, it was strange stuff. Obviously, the three
with
rings.
a serpent around the globe.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if I can, can I share the screen with you? I think I can share the screen with you guys here. Um, Here we go. Can you guys see this?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So if we zoom in on this here, and you actually read what it says around here, we command you to visit the sick, relieve the distressed, bury the dead, and educate the orphan.
Oh gosh.
So these guys are the top hat people with canes you see in these photos. These were the ones who took control of the operation. Here's a serpent wrapped around a globe in the center. The new education system, I suppose. I'm not sure who the two women are. Maybe these represent the age it happened. Maybe it was Gemini or something. I don't know. Just spitball in there. But the Sovereign Grand Lodge of the Independent Order of the Oddfellows, 1834. But these guys were in control of, educating the orphans, visit the sick, relieve the distressed, bury the dead. The distressed of what? What just happened? That where people are so distressed and need relief, How many dead people are there that they're in control of burying them? Like, what's
Probably lots
going
of them.
It's-
Probably lots of
Yeah,
them.
and just on a side note, by the way, just to shill here, the three rings is their logo, and it was a member of this society that invented the circus, the three ring circus. So I'm just going to say that just to throw it in there quickly. But yeah, in fact, this is funny. This is related to tartaria. I only just discovered this recently, but P.T. Barnum is the one who was a member of this around the same time. He was a member of the Oddfellows. He's the one who created the three ring circus, a real charlatan of the time. You should see his house. This is what he lived in. Look at this thing.
Oh wow.
Oh wow.
He's one of the founders, right? He found himself a really nice Moorish architecture revival style, Eastern Orthodox something or other for himself there, didn't he? Like, that's ridiculous, isn't it?
That looks. I mean, that looks like the Taj Mahal.
Yeah, and look, he has
Pretty
this
real.
little outhouse to the right here as well, going for him as well while he's at it, just something for a bit of fun. And who knows what this is, this little menagerie down here. But this is his house, and it's kind of... Are these his other stately homes as well? These are the things he had going for himself? This is the main one?
I guess he wasn't working for peanuts.
No.
As they say at the circus.
Absolutely not, no. But you look at the members of the Oddfellows.
You really would say, like, people would say like that we're reaching sometimes, and you look at that I can't even believe that logo. Like literally, it's a snake wrapped around the globe.
Oh yeah.
It's like you would think we were making that up.
I mean, you look at these guys. These are the guys we keep seeing in front of buildings, right? With the top hats and everything. But in God we trust. Trust which God? With the all-seeing eye up there. But if you look at the members, and honestly, this list is extensive. They are the most powerful. The most powerful. There's Barnum here, sat down here as well. There's Albert Pike, the writer of Morals and Dogma, just here as well. While we're at it.
Totally satanic.
He was a member of both. But here's a list of all the members. Prime Minister of the UK there. We've got the 33rd Governor of Illinois. We've got Red Skelton, a famous clown, funnily enough. They've got the Kentucky Giant there, John. And it's a mixture of actors and presidents and prime ministers, which is an odd mix. There's Charlie Chaplin. We've got the lawman, we've got a Chief Justice there, there's Albert Pike, we've got a civil engineer, we've got a Justice of the US Senate, past US Senator, a Governor of Idaho, we have the King Olav V of Norway. These memberships are really odd. King George, I believe, was a member of England as well. Another US Senator, the 29th US President, Warren Harding, was a member. Franklin Roosevelt, the 32nd US President, was a member. There's Winston Churchill. He was also a member. It's ridiculous. You look at this list, they were the most powerful, influential people of any time period, are members of this particular fraternity. There's P.T. Barnum, the guy I was telling you about. And then randomly thrown in there are footballers and actors and comedians and other things as well. So bizarre, so strange. I think this is the guy who created it, Thomas Wildley here. So maybe we need to look into
So
this guy.
so where I mean, where does that even name that Oddfellows? Because it doesn't sound like a very flattering name. It's just I mean, yeah, for lack of a better term, it's odd to label the group that, and it's because it's just strange. Why do they have a explanation for that?
No, they never explain themselves. They never explain
I guess
themselves.
I guess
No.
it's probably a secret. You
Yeah.
probably,
Yeah,
probably don't
maybe there's some gematria to ODD or something like that. I don't know. But I think my working theory is if you're a member of the Oddfellows, you're all actors on the world stage. So that's why it's always the kings and the prime ministers and the presidents who are members of these societies. Their job is to go out and play the role of the leader of a particular place or country.
right.
And
Mhm.
then when they die, they'll probably go on to take another role somewhere. And we know about crisis actors. We've all been in this game for long enough to know they play these type of games with us, with bloodline families, and use the repeat characters on different news stations for different events and things like this, allegedly, you know. But I think it's odd that the Oddfellows are surrounding themselves with actors as well as prime ministers in these lodges. They're all probably actors, as far as I'm
You know, it's
concerned. You know.
what they say over where we live is that Washington D.C. is what is it? It's Hollywood for ugly people.
Yeah.
I mean that's what everyone's always said. You know, like it actually makes. I mean, it makes sense in the sense that you realize that even if you don't believe to that level, you realize that like senators and big people in government, a lot of them have these staffs and they're just glad handing and they're going out there selling it. It's like they're the public face of it, but obviously they're not doing all the legislating.
Mm-hmm.
They ain't writing the bills. They're going out there to smile and and kiss babies. Unfortunately, that phrase is really creepy now. And do all the things to sell it to the public,
Mm-hmm.
to be the face of it. And obviously, that is in itself acting because you know that they're all just full of it.
Yeah, the script writers are probably the people in these lodges I just showed you. The lodge itself makes the scripts. They go out and play the role. And I find it interesting that it was that particular lodge that was given control over the orphans and the rebuilding attempt and that time period. It seems like they had a serious hand in all of it. But it's the shrouded in they're a secret society. They're not easy to find much else out about them. But you'll find loads of posters of like people like saying thanks to the Oddfellows for the brand new orphanages that they've just built, and it just shows like a poster with these drawings of like 5 red bricked ornate buildings, and it's kind of they've all been given a certain name or something, and it's kind of like yeah, the Oddfellows have just built these wonderful orphanages for us, you know. Let's go use them.
You cracked me up the other day when you're saying, I'm not sure if you came up with this when you were talking about Freemasonry. Like, hey, there's some Freemasonry. Let's go found it.
Yeah, I made a funny meme for it actually.
I mean, did you come up with that? Because I was like, wow, like because I was hearing people like the only thing that the Freemasons actually built was a bunch of lies, like because they didn't build those buildings.
Yeah, I mean,
but they take credit for it though, and yeah, Freemasonry. I thought like,
yeah, I mean, I don't know if
that's so obvious. It sounds perfect.
I don't know if I can share this with you guys easily. I think people on my screen might be able to see it now, but I made a funny meme relating to this, which maybe we can spread and get out there and start using as like a thing. How do you do it? Can I just share screen? Let's just do entire screen.
Is it the free real estate one?
Yeah, it's the free real estate one. Let's see if I minimize this. Just let me know. Can you see this one?
Yeah.
There you go.
Oh yeah, yeah, exactly. There you go.
Yeah, I think we can. Everyone want to screenshot this and spread it around.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not bothered about credit or anything, but let's just get it out there. I think it'd be funny. But that's pretty much what it was. I think it was the Millennial Kingdom ended, and his enemies who lived through it were like finally, and they just basically moved into all the empty buildings and started working with their master in these secret societies, which is Lucifer, isn't it? You know.
Yeah.
The Luciferian doctrine, which is what Albert Pike has talked at to no end about getting us on board with, getting the people on board with their religion. You know, that's what they're aiming for, isn't it? So,
here's a question I have for you guys, and this ties in a little bit is what most people know of like the 20th century and probably in the late 19th century. There was obviously this quick shift in technology where like if you believe the narrative, what they went from like the 1860s or something like that with the first automobiles, And then if you believe what they tell us, in 100 years they were on the moon basically. Like so where did this come from? Because it does, I mean, if you believe, if you go down the rabbit hole and you believe that these buildings represent possibly a time of free energy, something that sounds, if it's true, based on like electromagnetism, the ether, and I mean whether that's true or not, it seems like that would probably be better for the environment, even if you're not a tree hugger. It seems more sustainable. And then all of a sudden you have this technology that just pops up, and obviously it is destructive, because I mean, like, literally that stuff's powered by fire and explosions. And like where do you guys think that like that came from? Because you would think that, like, I was looking this up the other day, and I was looking up when was electricity invented. Obviously electricity is not invented, but when was it used practically? And I remember thinking about that. One of the things that came up was some of this garbage they tell us in school was that Benjamin Franklin like flew a kite with a key on it and it got struck. And you're like, that is the stupidest. Like, now looking back, that is one of the stupidest things I've ever heard, because it's like nobody knew about lightning and electricity before Benjamin Franklin. Like, that is, I mean, that is something you tell a kid and they're like, oh, that's interesting, because Benjamin Franklin for them might as well live 10,000 years ago. But it's really not that long ago. And so so then you look at it's like, they didn't, I think they had electricity was like invented by some guy who had a working electrical coil like in probably like in the 1870s or something like that. But all this stuff happened at a certain time, and it progressed rapidly to now that we have smartphones and the internet and everything.
Well, on that, I think Daniel 7, the prophecy, does talk about this age that we live in now, where this type of technology would start to appear. That fourth beast, I believe, is before and after the Millennial Reign.
Okay.
So it's the fourth beast that had their kingdom taken away, given to the saints. Millennial Reign ends, short season begins. The fourth beast, the kings who lived through it, take over again and re-establish what they were attempting to build prior, which is why I think we have this Roman iconography weaved in throughout all Freemasonry and secret societies, because they are the leaders of and members of that original beast system that was there beforehand. And once the Millennial Kingdom ends, a new world order began. And that's what we're always talking about in the secret societies. A new world order is not coming. They established it for the little season. We are in the new world order after the Millennial Reign. And I do think, like I said, what we have today is what's described as this beast with metal teeth and nails of brass, weapons, bullets, guns, the things we had to deal with today. It's a system of metal, churning systems industry, cogs. It's the world you're describing, explosions. It's a world driven through metal, not stone. And he also describes this is more diverse than any other nation that became before it. And diversity is something that our society pushes hard now. It's a key. It's a key word ripped straight from Daniel. And many other things in our society are also ripped straight from the Bible. Like the word pride is also pushed on us hard as well. And diversity I thought was interesting as a main concept, because that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to make an amalgamed world where there's no borders, right? One world order, one currency. Everybody becomes one. Everybody just mixes with each other and becomes a strange color of beige or something. I don't know what it is, but they have this, and all under the banner of diversity is our strength, right? That's discussing the diverse kingdom of metal and brass, which is where we live, which was before and after the Millennial Reign. They picked up where they left off and continued on.
So you believe that some of this technology, do you think perhaps this could be founded stuff? Do you think this is like maybe there was this knowledge was known
probably
at a time before, and like, so that's why it was almost like somebody knew how to jump, like as soon as they got it, like, okay, we'll go. And obviously I mean, I don't think that anyone could deny that it progressed rapidly.
No, I think just before tribulation occurred, I don't think we really know what that world was actually like. I think we're told it was just people on donkeys and like just barren desert, and everything was terrible, and there was no technology whatsoever, and people lived to the age of 20 or something like that. But I'm starting to think, with a lot of research into this, maybe they lived in something akin to a beautiful architecturally designed world than we actually understand. And I think where Jesus was walking wasn't just deserts necessarily. It was actually buildings and ornate structures and all sorts of things that and I think we've been lied to just how complex that world actually was, technologically
That's very
and
possible.
physically. Yeah, because there's plenty. Like, it's weird because in medieval art, for example, they always depict Jesus as though he's wearing medieval clothing and walking in medieval places. And the people that have tried to describe this in the art world as it's like a style, apparently. The people of that time have a weird concept of time, and that they like to draw historical figures as though they lived with them. And it's kind of that is the most that's nonsense. Like
Yeah,
the things that it's like we're so smart that we understand why they did these things. You just don't understand art, okay? That's the type of attitude these articles have about trying to
Mhm.
justify why these things were done. But is it possible this is artwork from the times of when Jesus was actually walking around in these cities, and
yeah.
we're just told it's medieval artwork, and they just like to be so romantic with the way they depicted historical figures. It's kind of
Well,
like, no, that's Jesus wearing like medieval clothing in a medieval building, surrounded with all of his people having a meal. You know what I mean? That's
Mhm.
perhaps
they
yeah.
they do they do like a twist on that sometimes. Like you see like art depicted, but it's usually Jesus wearing what you would imagine him wearing in 2024,
Hmm.
like walking around a city. But he would still be wearing all the robes and the sandals and everything. They don't typically depict him wearing like blue jeans and a
Yeah.
flannel.
Yeah.
No, exactly. It's just odd, but I'm just thinking maybe like that technology was just about to begin. Like they were just about to start building factories and they were just about to start messing with electricity, and then Christ came and ended that very quickly. So
I learned
you
it.
know.
I researched this once. I was reading this book about Rome because I was really fascinated with the idea that this may never made sense to me that the Romans had technology that they didn't have afterwards, and like this stuff was lost. So I said, well, what did they have? And if you go back into the first century, like Nero, possibly the Antichrist, they said he had a tower that actually rotated and had a machine that literally had like ball bearings and everything.
Hmm.
And then you start looking at what the Romans had in the first century, and like literally they had working machines, whether they used water to spin their gears. But I mean, they had machinery, depending on whatever they did. I think I was watching a show. If you watch some of like they did stuff with glass that was crazy, and I think there was the craziest thing they did. They figured out a way to basically mine these mountains where they could literally blow them up, like between supposedly with like water pressure. I mean, like they were saying, like they destroyed mountains. So like what kind of tech did they really have? And it's like obviously we have no idea. And even if where Jesus was at was not technologically advanced, you could go places today in 2024 and you could find people walking around wearing sandals around huts. It doesn't mean that the whole place is
Hmm.
like that. It just means that
Mhm.
obviously there's pockets of place. And obviously Jesus being from Nazareth, even that was mocked at the time. Nothing good comes from Nazareth. This is this poor
Mhm.
place.
Hmm.
So like maybe that place was poor and parts of the place was poor, but yeah, like the obviously wherever the Romans set up their governors and everything that were probably not like that.
Hmm. Well, like I said, we imagine when Jesus was here, don't we, that he was this beautiful place where etheric energies were, and people were using these buildings to harness cathedrals, cathodes, giant batteries, basically cities laid out like circuit boards. Perhaps that was his kingdom, and it was powered by his presence. It seems like that's the top theory right now. I've heard quite a few times. Him being around is what powered everything in this etheric, ether-like sense. And the buildings are basically just duds now. They don't do that anymore because the energy just isn't there anymore for them to harness anything. So it seems before he turned up, perhaps like you said, they were trying to make their own way of getting power and energy by burning coal, exploding things, a
Hmm.
destructive way of doing it. You know what I mean? Non-renewables, limited energies, let's say oil and things like that. But I think it seems like it probably got cut short. He established his reign and says, "Look at what I can do. It's way better than what you were going to do," basically. But then,
Hmm.
then obviously he leaves. The buildings that are left behind no longer function as they did when he was around. So they pick off where they left off and try to reestablish these old technologies. And that's probably where they got back to. Well, let's use our water pressure cannons that we broke mountains with to crack the earth and extract the shale gas instead.
Hmm.
That's
Hmm.
fracking. That's what it is. It's the same. It's the same technology, you know,
Oh,
and
wow. Mhm.
so maybe that's what it is. It's just been repurposed to rebuild this new world order where it's we power everything because we are the gods. We harness the energies of all things, and we control the processes of the flow of energy. And we don't need Jesus to have power, to have electricity. We have the Prince of the Power of the Air on our side. We'll use him instead, and he taught us to do this instead. Maybe this is what's going on, and people. Yeah, Manly P. Hall wrote about magic, and it says the true initiate has the seething powers of Lucifer running through his veins. You know, these type of Lucifer is the giver of power today. He's the one who gives us the
Mhm.
energies to build and be the builders and establishers of this new world order. So maybe that's what it is. Maybe we're living in like an echo, lesser, crappier version of what Jesus had, and this is Lucifer's attempt to create his version of a millennial reign, and he was
Mhm.
about to do it before Jesus turned up, but he got cut short, and now he's going all out now to reestablish what could have been in like maybe like a prideful look what I can do, God. You know, I can be just as powerful as you. I can do what you did. I can create
Mhm.
electricity too. You know,
I
I
can make it
can.
rain.
Yeah, all
Storm
the
gods.
exactly. I've got my weather modification. I can do whatever I want. You know, um, but again, I mean,
Vitaly, have you looked into like so where do you have any kind of research into that like the shift in the technology in the 1800s?
Yeah, I mean, it's like the old verse, there's nothing new under the sun. If you look into a lot of like legends and paintings, you see things like magic mirrors, right? Where people are
Mhm.
able to talk to somebody on a mirror, on the other side of the world, right? Or they're
Mhm.
able to get answers to questions just by asking the mirror. I mean, we got this, right?
Yeah,
But
for
what if
sure.
that was like the technology during the millennial reign? They're able to
Mhm.
communicate with each other. They had phones, airships. It was almost like a steampunk type world.
yeah,
Yeah, that's what I was
That's
thinking.
what's in my head.
Well, you know what's interesting? As I always connect everything to the movies, I was thinking about this. The first Transformers movie, they discover Megatron in the Arctic, and they discover him in the late 1800s. Like he's
Mhm.
there. They take him and they put him in the Hoover Dam, and they reverse engineer everything based on his technology. And obviously, you think about it. So at some point, Megatron fell because that's how he got here. And of course, where did he fall from? I mean, if you think about it, it's like if there was any connection with him and the devil, like literally, you could think he would have fell. He's somewhere in the Arctic, so he fell straight there. They found him in the ice, and they literally reimbursed all the technology, and that's where that stuff comes from. I mean, that's like the even that kind of sounds similar to when people say there was, Roswell, the alien spaceships crash, and they use that tech reverse technology, and then they now you have the modern smartphones and microchips and all that kind of stuff. I mean, there's clearly something with that whole idea of like that. I did a video about this that so you have storm gods who are all associated with lightning, and then there's these power buildings in America that obviously they could either be old world buildings or they have these. I mean, this stuff looks satanic on them. I said, look at the GE building in New York City, and look at like there's the Niagara Mohawk building in like Syracuse, New York. Like there's another one in Kansas City, the Power and Light building. They look like straight from Ghostbusters. Like they look like these evil buildings, and they're all associated with electricity. And then yeah, the Prince of the Power of the Air is like, is that where that comes from? That like literally he gave man like the Prometheus mythos of like he gave man fire, he gave
Mhm.
him electrical
mm,
electricity. But it is like it does seem like I mean we all use this stuff, but yeah, it does seem like there's a cost to using this, not just monetarily, but like we are burning coal. You're seeing these black plumes of smoke, and it's ultimately, and again, I think as we try to use these things for good, ultimately they're not that good. I mean, like there's a price to pay for what we standing in front of our computers and our phones all the time.
Mhm.
the Amish have it right, maybe.
I think that well, I mean,
Yeah,
again, like I think they were talking about like during the pandemic and stuff like that. They fared pretty well somehow,
yeah,
not
absolutely.
being around all the other people and didn't taking all the stuff. And yeah, they're. I mean, I guess if you think like the old
Technology or getting off the phones is our wilderness, like That's how we get away.
It just broke
Well,
up
I
for me.
mean,
Sorry, it just broke up for
oh,
me for a second there, so I missed something. I don't know what was said. Sorry. I think it froze.
Computer, social media might be our wilderness. You know, how in the Bible they had their wilderness to go to. Well,
Yeah,
ours
yeah.
might be disconnecting.
yeah, that'd be a good analogy for it, wouldn't it? I'm wondering,
Yeah.
I'm wondering as well. I mean, I talk about technology quite a lot with Vicky Joy Anderson not that long ago, and we were talking about like it seems like teenagers' minds are a bit different when it comes to dreams these days as well. Things are kind of, it's like a net is taking over our minds and affecting even
Yeah.
the way we perceive reality when we're dreaming. And she brought up this idea that it seems like teenagers' dreams today are very different from us in the sense that they're actually like having full movie experiences as dreams rather than like
Mm.
symbolic ways that we would have had in the past, like Daniel, let's say, having his wild dream about the beast with 10 horns or something like that, you know.
Mhm.
And she's saying, is it possible the technology is so integrated with their minds now that it's kind of projecting these whole realities in their brains that are kind of like a movie script in some way? But she was talking about AI as well, and I think AI is something maybe we need to talk about in regards to all this because this seems to be like the amalgamation of this type of technology, I think, into one.
Hmm.
This is the result. This is the end game of all this technology that Satan's created from the 1800s developed to today. Let's say to create
Mhm.
what some kind of what is this? And people have also said to me, is it possible a lot of these photos that are suddenly arising right now, showing Millennial Kingdom architecture, let's say, is just AI generated images to make us believe in a false history? I suppose I play devil's advocate again here. But with the rise of this technology, I mean, have you seen the videos that can be made now just with like a prompt, like a few just
Mhm.
10 words, you know?
Yeah, I'm surprised at that. Actually, it's funny because I was my daughter was showing me a video and it was about like I don't know megalodon or something like that. But I was like, it's clearly obviously an AI voice and it's all AI and obviously it's coming at you like crazy. And I was like saying, I wonder if this is somebody just using Chat GBT to literally just say, make me a conspiratorial video about megalodon and sharks because it was stupid. I mean, but it was engaging the way it was done. And I'm like, I
Mhm.
don't know what they used to do that. Obviously, as somebody who makes the videos myself without all that, I'm like, oh, this is gonna take this is gonna take eyeballs from my videos. It's like because that might be easy for the people to spit videos out like that.
Hmm.
But to go to that point of like, can AI produce these images? Obviously they can, but at the same time, we have real world examples of these things. So I think that
Yeah.
like, so is it possible that like you remove people from the pictures that we were talking about, the real eerie?
Hmm.
Possibly, but there's still mud on the streets. We still have evidence of like buildings that are buried up to
Hmm.
past their first floor.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So like so like what would be the point of me making more of those?
Hmm.
I mean, they're like literally. I said it's the opposite because they're trying to wipe these things out in real time.
Hmm.
Mhm.
But I do think that there is in the play in the space that we because we're likely to believe lots of things. Yeah, don't go run out there first. Obviously they could AI does it all the time. People talking about like, you know, dogmen and weird things, and you're like, yeah, I don't think that looks real. That's
Hmm.
probably if it doesn't, yeah, it probably is not real.
I mean,
Mhm.
I think a lot of people equated maybe because the argument is based on this. So the tech we have is maybe what 20 to 50 years behind what they actually have, if you get what I mean. So what
Hmm.
we see AI in development today is actually nothing compared to the AI that actually exists. And people have equated maybe the Mandela effect and the way things are just changing everywhere. It may have something to do with this AI editing system that's going back and editing every record it can find on the internet, for example, of anything at all, and
Right.
changing it slightly. And I think what I'm saying is people have equated that, oh, well, this Millennial Kingdom Tartarian stuff only appeared recently. The photos that they're claiming are dated to a time where cameras don't even exist, for example, and things like this. So it's kind of like, do we as researchers do we need to be careful with this? But like I said, as you said, well, we have physical buildings we can go and look at, which are clearly buried underground and have those little
Hmm.
windows, and so we
Mhm.
can. But I think the whole point is now we live in this age of technology that we're trusting it so much. it's easy to sow doubt about anything now. We can't really. It's hard for us to figure out what is true because there's just so much working against us and so much disinformation
Yeah.
mixed in with this as well, isn't there? I suppose I'll leave that point there and let you guys mull it over. But yeah, it's just something I've been thinking about.
I mean, it's kind of what the Bible says, right? My sheep can hear my voice and they follow, right?
Hmm.
I mean, sometimes it's like, even without research, you just feel like you know something to be true. You don't know what it is or what's telling you. And
Yeah.
then slowly along the way, you start seeing little bits of evidence, right? Like, in the back of my mind, I had this feeling that this has got to be true. And then you start seeing little evidence here and there, and you're like, okay, now it actually might be true.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think that. Well, I think that I said I liken that to what I was saying. Like I didn't know. That's why I said I made a video like over the summertime, one of my first podcasts, and I was saying there's something deep in my soul that says there's something weird that went out west in the United States. It just stuff, and once I physically went there, like you really, I mean, it literally looks like the mountains were melted like wax. I mean, that's the best I can describe it as. It looks like that. So like whatever they say, don't give me this millions of years stuff because obviously nobody could prove that even if that was the case.
Hmm.
But I think that's what it comes down to. But I think it is interesting when you talk about the build in aliens, because I think most people probably the first megalith that we know about is obviously the Giza Plateau. So we know about the Great Pyramids, but until somebody really points out the size and scope of it, and they point out like the granite stuff and the obviously even more impressive stuff in Egypt, it really doesn't. You don't like you just don't understand. Oh well, the Egyptians were advanced, but then what shows like Ancient Aliens did, even though their narrative is incorrect,
Mhm.
they show so many places like that all around the world, and I think that's when you have to like start to square it in your brain, like, wait a minute, how did all these people do that stuff? And like then you get the mainstream answers. They make no sense. I mean, like the copper tools stuff is just it's clown stuff that they're saying they did. Sorry, Paul. It makes no
Yeah.
sense that they cut those blocks with copper tools, rocks
Well,
that are harder than the tools.
a lot of people say now, oh well, we know how they did it now. They created a geopolymer and then a cast, and then they filled it with geopolymer and stamped it down, and then
Yeah.
removed the thing, and then you had a block. They didn't actually build and move blocks. But then at the same time, we have images of huge obelisks made out of one piece of stone,
Right.
half cut out the ground, unfinished. So who was going to lift that stone once it was finished? Is what I'm saying. Like it's like,
Well, you know, what's funny is somebody like as somebody with a construction background. My family has owned a construction company. I've actually physically done the work, and we would do plaster. You know, so like if you do stucco is cement and lime and sand. So guess what? Even if the stuff was poured, it's still heavy. Like, you know what I mean? So like you could say, oh well, he didn't. It wasn't concrete when he before he poured it, but it's like, but the bags still weigh a lot. The bags, like shoveling the sand, still was hard. So like the idea that it's way easier for them to mix this stuff, and it's like it all weighs the same. So like explain to me how that's easier. I mean, it looks like they weren't poured because it's like especially like the megaliths, they're typically not uniform sizes.
mhm,
They're different shapes. They're all like how do they make the pyramid level when all the blocks are different? You know, that's
mhm,
way harder than if they were all the same. And if you had a mold, wouldn't they all be the same? So I think that I think that's somebody who doesn't have a construction background. They have no idea about the actually physically making these things. Point being is that I think that once people started to wake up to all the megaliths, they're like, wait a minute, something's wrong. There's obviously a lost civilization, and obviously biblically, a worldwide flood makes sense to why we don't know what happened the time before, especially when all these legends involve like gods and giants. It's like, well, that sounds like Genesis 6 and 7. But then you go forward to where we're talking the space we're talking about now. It is like talk about like right under your noses. Everyone's like wanting to go to the Amazon and they want to go over to Egypt to look at megaliths. And you're like, you got something more impressive right in your like right downtown from you. That's it's equally as mysterious as like, wait a minute, the first floor is under the ground, and then all the shapes in this place are all perfect, and it doesn't look like anything you've ever seen. And so like so I don't, like I said, to me, it's like that physical evidence is really like, you know, the pictures aside, because the pictures, if you go to these places, the pictures don't do it justice. And I implore people, if you do have a building like that in your town, go research the history of it. And 9 out of 10 times, the history, it sounds like it's lies, probably because it is. Like we went, like my girlfriend at the time, my wife now, we went to Asheville, North Carolina, and they have, this is where the Vanderbilts built the biggest mansion in the United States. It's called the Biltmore Estate. And you're just looking at this thing, and it's like, supposedly this guy built this when he was like 30 years old, and he didn't live in it very long. And it like, I was like, aren't the Vanderbilts from like New York? Why did they build it like kind of out in the boonies in North Carolina? And yeah, it's all of it's like copper domes, gargoyles. It's got like antennas everywhere. Like the bedrooms are very small. I Now that I mentioned, I don't really remember. I don't remember them showing us the bathroom. Maybe there wasn't one in there. And you're like what was this place? And then if you look at it from the side, like, it looks like, yeah, these places were like lightly laid out where they had gardens, like maybe they grew stuff there, and this thing was some kind of electrical conductor.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's water around it. I mean, I was kind of blown away. Like I said, the mainstream take makes no sense, because it's like, obviously being rich. Yeah, I get it, building a big house, but it's not like it doesn't look very comfortable. It doesn't look like a place you would live. It looks like a museum.
Hmm.
It doesn't look like it doesn't look like a 30-year-old's bachelor pad. that's
And
for sure.
surely it would have been cold as well, right? And very difficult to heat. And it would have just been the practicality of living in it isn't actually as clear as they make it out to be. Like I've noticed this as well. They have they have those strange fireplaces, they call them, don't they? Which
Right.
have no burn marks whatsoever, as though a
Right.
fire has ever been made in them ever. You know, it's kind of like that. What were these exactly? Like they're probably energy harvesting technology that we just don't understand. We literally have no context to understand how they work whatsoever. Um, Fountains as well. Like you talk about no toilets, and they have these
Right.
huge ornate
That's
fountains.
well, that's what the crazy part is. People are told that these people couldn't create indoor plumbing. Meanwhile, I think one of these places, I think it was in England, that they had this fountain that could shoot like 250 feet in the air. And there's fountains all over the property, and it's like, okay, so I think that they were pretty good at plumbing. So, but they couldn't create a toilet that flushed.
A cistern, the most simplest water gravity based system ever devised. Like, yeah,
Right.
probably,
So so that it obviously makes no sense when you realize it, again, like, even look at what the Romans had. The Romans created all those aqueducts, like, I don't know how many thousands of years ago, supposedly.
hmm
They knew how, first of all, these people knew how to get rid of waste, and they knew how to move water from like for a long time. So yeah, so the idea that these people didn't know how to do these things, yeah, and they didn't know how to, they were all freezing to death in these gigantic mansions. It's like,
hmm
I think that's what people don't really understand. It's like these people were very smart. They always try to tell us the people from before were not as smart as we are,
hmm
but these people were very smart. So like with that kind of idea, well, they were kind of just getting it. They were kind of just coming along with it a little bit. Like Ben Franklin taught them about electricity, about the key and the lightning.
Mhm.
No, like, these people were obviously super smart. Anybody who could do what they did, and if they did it with the tools that they supposedly had, they were way smarter than even us, because if you can create things with less advanced tools, doesn't it actually make you more advanced? Not,
Well,
like, not, they were smart enough to do what we can't do, but they weren't smart enough to find an easy way to do it by creating a tool that would make it easy.
who said they even used their hands to build these things? I mean, if the saints were involved, if these are millennial
Right, no,
kingdom
correct.
things, who knows
Yeah.
how these things were built? Maybe they were just willed into existence by just imagination, for all we know. If these saints are resurrected in like the 9 dimensions of perception or something like that, but what does it mean to have a glorified body? What does that mean? Like, we can't even understand that the abilities these people may have had. Who knows? Because it's not that maybe with enough money and time and effort and manpower, perhaps we could come close to building these things. Maybe it is possible, but the people who were told built them should not have had those capabilities or manpower or the time or the money, you know. And we even us today with all our amazing technology, we don't build things as beautiful or as ornate as they did. We don't have the time or power or money, or we don't even see the point. Is
Well,
you tell you know
there's not modern buildings that we walk past and say, "Wow, I wonder how they did that."
no.
Like we know, and I said it was funny. My wife was actually saying the exact same thing to me. Was she was like, "I want to see pictures of people building those things."
Mhm.
Like if you really think about it, man is nothing but prideful. If you built some of these structures, wouldn't you be proud of it? Like, wouldn't you be documenting all the things you did, like all along the way? Like we're building the thing that nobody's ever seen before because
Mhm.
they're all unique. Like,
Mhm.
wouldn't there be pictures of all that stuff? Because it's like everyone's super impressed, but like there's pictures of mud on streets. There's some pictures of people using hammers and chisels to carve out these rock these domes and whatever.
Mm. 'Cause most Tartarian thinkers who aren't coming at it from the Christian perspective, they believe there's multiple resets that keep happening. And what we're seeing are remnants of societies that got too big for the boots, too hard to control, so the controllers just hit a button, destroyed everything, caused a mud flood, and then started again and moved back in and did repopulation events of some kind. It's very much giving all the power to them, isn't it? That's what the Tartarian, I've always found their research always leads to. The controllers have all the power, and at any moment they could just hit that button and reset everything. You know, watch
It is
yourself. You know.
it is curious, and I was just thinking about this, and I was actually going to ask you guys this question: is that like it does feel like that again? So like people are saying like how are like like everyone kind of coming on to these similar ideas at the same time, and it's like why is everyone talking about these buildings now? And it's like I think because obviously the fact that again you were saying you walked past these buildings in your own town, you didn't even notice them until you started to know what you were looking at.
Mhm.
And then so like as the more of these things are getting shared, obviously the more people are like us are digging into this stuff. Do you guys are you guys feeling like I don't know, I don't ever want to be so tunnel vision in my own little creator space in my own little sphere of people who I watch.
Mhm.
Is what we're waking up to this possible short season? Because I know preterism, as far as I know, it's not new. But I think to the level of people saying, "Here's physical evidence of this," I didn't hear this until recently. Do you guys think that this is becoming like a more accepted idea, or this is like, or is this are we like kind of the tip of the spear on people talking about this kind of stuff, or is this growing, or am I just imagining that?
Maybe we're close to the end, and that's why, whenever you're close to the end of days, like in the Bible, whether it's the flood or Armageddon, there's always, I guess, people realizing the truth, right? Like with Noah's flood, right? He
Hmm.
warned them what's going to come. And then with Armageddon, Jesus said, here's what's going to come. So it's like information gets out close to the end. So maybe we are at that final stretch, basically. And that's why this is all coming out. It's
Mm.
like a cycle. Every cataclysm type event at the end of it, or when you get close to the end, a bunch of information comes out. And it's not that people are more accepting, it's just that the information is getting out there.
But what do you think? But Vitaly, do you think that as far as since you've been making these videos for a little while now, have you noticed more like the videos you're making now? Are you getting like? Did you ever have a point where you were making these videos and people were like, "Oh, that's heretical what you're saying," and like they're like the ratio of people calling you heretics to versus saying that makes a lot of sense. You think that that's increasing?
Um, there's like three kinds of people. There's people who say it's heretical. There's people who are looking into it, and then there's people who just like are kind of lost. They're like, I don't know. I'm really confused about both. Like, I don't know if either or is true.
Hmm.
And I still think this is more rejected than anything, because
Hmm.
you interviewed Paul, that one person, that one lady from No Place Like Home, right? Is
Yeah,
that the channel?
Shelley from No Place. There's no
Yeah,
place
yeah,
like home.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So she made a great point, and she said that like in today's day and age, Christians are very like self-absorbed. They always want to put themselves in parts of Scripture where they're not. Like we are the saints, right? We are going to go through tribulation.
We're the Church of Philadelphia, the one that gets raptured.
Yeah, where the Paul was writing those letters to us, those churches. That was metaphorical. That was just metaphors for the types of churches you don't want to be. He wasn't literally writing a letter. So this is about us, me, right?
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
I think that's why it's upsetting for people if this is true. But one thing I don't understand is people make it seem like if this is true, then all hope is lost. I'm like, what do you mean? Like just because we don't get to be part of a 1,000-year kingdom doesn't mean all hope is lost. You should look to the eternal kingdom. Like that's what I'm
Right,
looking
right.
for. But yeah,
Well,
I guess it sucks that we're not part of the beginning, right? It's the first time we've had peace in 1,000 years or for 1,000 years since the fall of Adam and Eve, right? So that
mhm.
would be exciting to be part of, but it's not the end of the world to me, whether this is true
Well,
or not.
maybe it is the end of the world.
Okay, it literally is, but
No, but
I mean,
well,
like,
I
of
was
course.
even joking was because I was saying like it's interesting when people say, and I even said this. I said, well, if you're saying that there is no, if there is no second coming to look forward to, then maybe you are kind of like shipwrecking people's faith. But then I actually thought about it. I'm like, but people said the same thing to me when I said the pre-trib rapture was not biblical. Because they had this hope in this rapture before anything bad happened. Like, so if your hope was in that, let's just say that they're still right. Like that there is still hope that that's the way it happens. You'd have to admit that throughout history, nobody's been raptured yet. So if all your hope was in that, maybe that is not the place you should put it anyways. Maybe it
Mm,
should have always been at the place that there's no tears, the New Jerusalem. Maybe that's
Mhm.
where it's always should have been. Just because Jesus is he's offering eternal life. He's not offering you a rapture. Like that's literally what he's offering us is eternal life. So like, where does that mean? Like, when does that start? Obviously, if you accept
yeah,
Christ, that starts immediately. But he never like that's not what his lead was. Hey, don't worry, I'm going to take you up into the clouds before anything gets bad. In this world, you will not have tribulation. You'll have a rapture. He
yeah,
didn't
I mean,
say he never said that.
while we're on this topic, people often ask, so why would the devil lie about this? Okay, he's lying to us that we're in the short season, so what's the point? I'm like, the point is that we might be preparing for the wrong event. And if we are prepared for the wrong event, we might see God as the Antichrist and his big old flying
Mm,
New Jerusalem mothership as the Antichrist and his legion, right? Instead of Christ and the saints. So this, hypothetically, if this is true, most people are preparing for the wrong thing. And when Jesus appears with the saints, if he does, if we are in the short season, most Christians are either going to be against it, fight it along with the rest of the world, or something else. So people are probably preparing for the wrong event. Everyone's waiting for what happens before Christ returns, right? Armageddon, the Antichrist, all this craziness. And what's crazier than a mothership appearing in the sky, like sci-fi looking battles happening? You're like, okay, this is the time of the Antichrist. Yep, that floating thing that is not from Jesus. That is
or now that people even in the truther spec might say, oh, this is Project Bluebeam. That's not even
yeah,
real. Like, I don't even believe that's real because we know that there's no flying, flying spaceships or flying, cities. Like that can't be real.
Mhm. That's
so yeah,
fascinating.
I mean,
Yeah.
people are preparing for the wrong thing, maybe. So that's
Yeah.
why he would lie. If I was the devil, like the Bible says, like be as wise as a serpent. And what would the devil do, or why would he lie about this? Or in fact, I'd like to ask people this question: if we're not in the little season, how is Satan going to act in the little season? Like, how is he going to lie about it? Right. So think about like those questions and write it out. Like, what is he going to do during this short season if we're not in it currently? Is he going to tell people the Millennial Kingdom never happened? Because I think that's something he would say.
Right.
He probably did already.
Mhm.
Right.
Well, he would say, like I said, I think that the typical futurist view would be there would be a physical kingdom in Jerusalem, and it would be all from there. And again, so like I think that's why when I would read Revelation 20, and I said he deceives all the nations, how does he do that if the God King is right over there? Like, nah, I'm gonna stick with God over here because I know what happens to you. Like, so maybe it's not so physically visible. And I said
Yeah.
it's interesting, like that if like the Marvel movies are showing Thanos is some representation of Jesus coming down in a ship to wipe out humanity, like it's obviously does seem like they're prepping this thing of like that that he literally is the bad guy. But again, if you love the world, he is the bad guy because he's literally coming to do what he says he's going to do. Which obviously, if you love the world, it's not good. But I said
Yeah.
it's interesting how like in the Marvel movies they say that they have a 1 in 14 million and something chance to beat Thanos. Well, somehow Satan convinces the nations of the world to march up the broad plain to fight Jesus where they have a less than 1 in 14 million chance. They have 0 chance to defeat Jesus. And yet he still gets them to go do it. I mean, I do think that that is worth wrestling around in your mind of like, so how would he do it? And obviously, I think that's what we're saying is like, it's obviously by any means necessary. Any way that he would lie to you, he would and could. If even it meant he killing people who are witnesses to these things and like burying the dead and re-educating the orphans. I mean, would he do that? I mean, I think the devil would do that.
I mean, you know what's interesting also is I recently made a video called "The Last War," like on this topic. What would the last war look like in the Bible? You know, the surrounding of the saints. And before that video, somebody in the comments in one of my videos pointed out that the New Jerusalem or the shape of it could be a flying pyramid.
That's interesting.
So there's 3 shapes that the New Jerusalem can be. Either it is a circle or like a globe, because all sides would be equal, right? A pyramid or a cube. And since Mount Zion is in the New Jerusalem, right? What is a mountain? A mountain it has this peak at the top and it goes up like. So he pointed out that the New Jerusalem is actually a floating pyramid, and that symbol that we've been made to hate so much, right? The Illuminati with the floating pyramid at the top of the base, right? But that's actually depicting the New Jerusalem, and we're kind of, I guess, tricked into hating that symbol or hating the pyramid. So that's what one subscriber pointed out, and I'm like, that is a good point. It does make sense if Mount Zion is on the New Jerusalem, and there would be some kind of pyramid shape on it or something, right? Like,
well, it's an interesting idea if you think about like that. So how do they when they construct the tabernacle? You know, like God's giving Moses instructions, and he's literally telling him how to build something that's like in heaven. So is it possible that if the pyramids were to represent like the fallen angels who have been up to heaven, they're telling them to create these things for them, and that's why they're such an abomination, because it's like literally they're trying to co-opt stuff that is God's because they're calling themselves to be a god.
So let me read you the comment I got concerning the shape of it. And this person says, please read this. You miss a crucial point concerning the New Jerusalem. It will be laid out like a square according to scripture. Kent Hovind, a shill, noted that pyramids also share those same dimensions. That means New Jerusalem may in fact be a crystal pyramid, which would make sense of a lot of symbols in movies. The Illuminati pyramid, a symbol of hierarchy, has a floating capstone hovering over what looks like a flat-topped mountain. While the sacred mountain in many cultures is depicted or implied to be flat-topped, that means the pyramid is likely symbolic of Mount Zion. But what about the floating capstone? Well, I suggest it may be symbolic of the floating city. That means the Illuminati symbol we were all made to hate so much may actually refer to our blessed Savior and his holy city. Just a thought. And then he says, flying pyramids are also a common theme in media. The 2004 TV series Immortals has one, for example. If you just Google floating pyramid, you get quite a few results, which is weird considering how random that concept seems from a normie perspective. So, yeah, that's what he said. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. I mean, if a flying pyramid shows up, we're gonna think
Right.
it's
Or, you know, that's a good point, because I think most of us would be like, yeah, see, like, yeah, that's what you would
Antichrist came in this pyramid, like to
that
deceive the
would
nation.
that would be a plot twist for
Yeah,
sure.
man, they're smart. If that would make sense because that is brilliant. I'm not gonna lie, like
Yeah,
that is a smart
I
thing to
would be
do.
thrown off with that, because you're thinking like, I wasn't expecting that. It was like,
Yeah, I'll
because
be like,
what's interesting, even the cube. I mean, like even the cube, like we would associate a cube with Saturn, which
yeah,
would be akin to Satan. And then so even if it did come back, like I was saying, even in the Star Trek movies, they have the Borg, and the Borg is comes in this gigantic cube,
Oh
and
yes,
they try to assimilate people, make them like these undead robot, cyborgs. Again, like that would be that to me. That seems like a twisted view of how they would appear. That the saint, what they're trying to make you a saint, is you got this glorified body, and that's their version of it. Is you with all these hoses and metal and weird stuff, and you're coming to just like these people are not human anymore. They've lost all their emotions.
I mean, there are UFO sightings they say that are pyramid shaped, which is interesting. So
just to quickly there, when I said my point, I was muted on my end and no one heard what I said. So they're kind of screaming at me now to repeat my point because your reaction was so excited. I think they're excited as well. And what did he say? What did he say? But I'm saying we have to rethink everything that we were taught and what we thought we were doing in the conspiracy world. We thought we were exposing the evil Illuminati and all the satanic symbolism, when it's maybe in light of this new theory, they were just feeding us evil things for us to expose, thinking we're being clever. And really, then once they've exposed their evil, the solution will be the light of Lucifer. We're always told it's this false dichotomy. But what if then that's just turning us against Jesus returning? We're thinking it's Lucifer coming, and that's our solution, the false savior or something. Even, in fact, I didn't mention this earlier, but even Helena Blavatsky, for example, a part of the Theosophical Society, has wrote a book about in the year 2025, the world teacher will appear, which is the Maitreya, which people have then equated throughout since she wrote that over 100 years ago. It's like, that's the Antichrist. That's going to be the Antichrist. It's a false savior. It's the anti-Jesus. It's the New Age Jesus. It's the hippie theosophical chakra alignment Jesus that's going to pretend to be like God, But now again, we have to rethink everything in light of if we're off where we think we are in the timeline and we're expecting tribulation, all of this could just be a long con. All of it could be a very long con to get us confused about who people are when they actually turn up. Because if we're waiting for the Antichrist, when Jesus appears, we're going to assume, well, this must be the Antichrist then. But if we're past all that, when Jesus comes back, it's the end. It's the end. The great final war, the end of time, full stop. Not a 1,000-year reign. So we're lost if we don't know where we are, like you were explaining earlier, Vice. That's why this matters in a big way. And knowing this, I think we need to start going back through all old conspiracies and look at it through this new lens and see what it looks like with these glasses on, with the Millennial Kingdom glasses on. Like,
hey, Paul, you better be careful doing that. They're gonna start commenting. You just threw up the 6.
I know.
I did, didn't I?
No.
I'm like, we're gonna get.
That's all they'll focus on now. That's all they're gonna focus on.
I was talking like this the other night, and I did this, and they were like, "Got him." And I was like,
3 people 3 years ago, they're like, "Can you not do that? Don't unless you're a Freemason deceiver." I'm like, "Oh my god."
It's I've done that before.
I'm gonna talk with my hands on the table, like I'm just like put your hands out where we can see them.
It's just like this.
See, the thing is, once I did that of my eyes, I realized I was like, okay, 2 pairs of glasses. Then we'll try and do it right. But I've been called a lizard man and everything, and
I'm sure you have.
It's happened before. I've done this before.
It's interesting though, as you said that we don't know what we're looking for, like that's what they don't want you to know. The one thing that blew my mind is, Vitaly, what you brought up was that all those articles talking about that World War III is going to be fought in like around the North Pole. Like, now that, talk about really being on the nose if you know what you're looking for. If we do believe that the camp of the saints is somewhere in that region, like, that should be alarm bells, because everyone's looking for the third temple. But like, that is like, you're talking about the hour getting real late if they're talking about armies marching around the North Pole.
Mm-hmm.
Now you're like, like with this mindset, you're like, I'm gonna get away from, I'm gonna be as far away from the fire. Like, I'm gonna go south because I don't want to be anywhere near the north when all the armies of the earth just happen to go up that way. Like, that's crazy.
On that, obviously we've interpreted that the broad.
Paul froze again.
Yeah, we tried to interpret. Oh no, am I back?
Oh, you're good now.
Okay, there we go. So we're assuming, obviously, the broad plane of the Earth. We're interpreting that as maybe Siberia or Russia, because it's like the longest plain we have that's unbroken now, shall we say. And like I said,
Mhm.
it looks absolutely decimated from what I've seen. It looks like a very difficult terrain to even get across, to be honest. It would be very difficult to make it up there. And I'm wondering, like, if you look at maps of magnetic North Pole, which is technically magnetic South Pole in
Mhm.
geographic north, if you want to get all technical about it, but whatever, it's moving. It's a moving point that's been going from Canada all the way across to Siberia. Maybe since like it's moving rapidly in the past 20 years, but it's been moving from there since like maybe the 1850s or something like that. And if this is the floating city, the giant pyramid we're talking about here or something, are people in that area eventually going to start seeing something just coming more and more into view? Are we going to say is that?
That's a crazy concept.
Yeah, but obviously that land itself is not really populated right now, so it would
Mhm.
take a long time for any populated area to start to see something appear. It would have to go quite far inland, if you get what I mean, just to actually be
And then people,
seen.
and then depending on what the news told people, they wouldn't even believe it. Like, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like, again, that's what we talk about AI pictures and like Project Bluebeam and all that kind of stuff. If they started floating the idea that there's a ship or something out that way, like how many people in our space would believe it?
When in the conspiracy world.
Yeah, I mean,
Oh
like in the
yeah.
conspiracy world, because a lot of them would just say that's obviously a psyop. This is like whatever Bill Cooper wrote about.
Hmm.
Along came a pale horse, and so they're trying to freak us out that there's an alien invasion coming, and then they're going to try to take our rights, and they don't realize that it's actually Jesus. That's kind of insane to think about that.
Well, the story, the predictive programming is the same for aliens. It's the same story. All of humanity drop their differences and come together to fight the one common enemy. Okay, we've been prepped to do that when aliens do turn up. That's what they're aiming for. Which would then probably if you can get all 9 billion people on board, because what greater threat to humanity than an alien invasion? Then you've got an army number of the sands of the sea. You know, you've got a big number of people there, haven't you? But I don't
Mm-hmm.
know. I mean, is this the great deception? Could this be that great deception? If that's so, is this one of those it could maybe deceive the very elect if it was that good, but it won't. It's the hope here for us that
Yeah, no, I
you know
think
what I
so.
mean. Like,
Absolutely. I got to run here in a minute, but I wanted to ask that one question to you, Paul. Again, like so, as I asked Vitaly, like, because obviously you mentioned before that you're kind of new to this space, talking about the subject. I know you've talked about it a lot recently. Like, so what do you think that like, as far as the people who have obviously followed you for the clown stuff and some of the other stuff you've done, like talking about this, like do you find that people are like do you find like the people that you like respect and you watch, do you think that there's more of us waking up? Do you think people like in your, as far as the people who like your content, are they waking up to this, or like what kind of ratio would you say are getting it or to rejecting it or to, you know?
it's a lot like what Vitally said. There's like three types of people. There's the staunch, you're a heretic types. We cannot talk about this, and the fact that you're even humoring it means you're clearly of Satan and completely lost and don't know what you're talking about. No, 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 this can't be right. Denial type people, like absolutely, and
You're
you
reading
know,
the Bible literally.
yeah, and I do say that. Says, well, that's just what it says. I'm just telling you
Right.
what it says right here. You know, I'm reading
Hmm.
these words to you. But there are a lot of people who are so invested in it being pre-trib rapture and all these type of things, and that tribulation's about to come and the Millennial Kingdom's about to come. I can see it. I empathize. It must be extremely difficult for them to even consider that this may be an option. I would say though about 80 to 85, maybe 89% of people who hear the theory are very on board with it. They're like, this makes sense. This clicks. The
Yeah.
majority are actually, you get the odd few, like Vitally said, who are like, I don't know what to make of this now. I need to think about this for a little bit. I need to go sit down. There's those people. There's some people where it's like, this makes perfect sense. This explains a
Hmm.
lot. And then there's that loud 5% contingent who are just outright furious that this has even been talked about in any way, shape, or form.
Hmm.
But me, as somebody who wasn't raised in a church, this is very easy for me to speculate about freely and not worry too much. I believe this is not a salvation issue. In fact, if anything, this has strengthened my faith far more now I'm thinking about it than it has prior, because it's in the past, we have to have faith in things that aren't seen. you know, and that's how it was. You know, we are waiting for something to come, where we
Hmm.
will wait that would undoubtedly prove to us his existence, but until then, we hold on to the faith of his coming, don't we? And obviously, I had experienced spiritual experiences which proved to me that it was real. He saved me. His name saved
Hmm.
me in the past,
Yeah.
and all these other
Hmm.
things. So I didn't need any more convincing. But for a lot of people, they do need that event to convince them. I think. I think a lot of their faith is hinging on tribulation coming to pass. That they're seeking a sign. They need to see the sign to have the faith, type of thing. But now I know, I can see now the Millennial Kingdom evidence everywhere with my own eyes. Now I know what I'm looking for. I'm like, wow, this is it.
Yeah.
Like, not
Hmm.
that I needed many more convincing, but this has just strengthened my. He's not a liar. He said he was coming soon, and he meant it, and it happened. You know what I mean?
Right.
There's
Right.
no
Yeah.
doubt that all doubt has gone with this concept and this theory. And that isn't to say I'm going to take a mark if one turns up. Of course, I'm not going to take a mark. Everything's
This
cyclical.
can't be the mark of the beast because we're way past this.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
gonna
I
go.
think a lot of
I need
people
to buy
think.
bread.
I think a lot of people think that's what I'm encouraging. Like, oh, you're going to tell people not to pay attention to the signs, and they're going to fall for the Antichrist tricks. It's like, why would that suddenly happen? Like, they haven't read the book. Like, why would I take anything akin to the mark of the beast in any way, shape, or form now? Like, you just wouldn't, would you? You know.
Right.
So,
Right.
but yeah, just to summarize the question, I don't think it's a big theory yet. I think we're at the forefront of this. I think it's not preterism as it has been done in the past. Preterism
Hmm.
in the past is all, it's a spiritual kingdom. It's not physical in that sense, and it was kind of low key fringe in the past with no real evidence to back it up other than it's like an interpretive opinion.
Mhm.
In this age, we have like receipts and physical evidence and
Yeah.
documentation and pictures, and we've pieced it all together, and this isn't preterism, this is something else. We need to call this something else,
Yeah, I agree
you
with that.
know.
Actually, I agree 100% with that. Actually, I was talking to somebody and they were kind of still of that view, and they were telling me, well, I haven't looked into the old world buildings, and I was like, well, you have to. Like, I mean, like you have to, because I think to me that's what, as you said, it's made it more real to me because like I don't want to hear that it's, oh, it's a spiritual thing and you're really never going to experience the millennial kingdom. It's just like, don't worry, it's happening right now and it's all, everything's good because Jesus is reigning. It's like, well, I already know that I already knew before that God is in control. So you telling me the millennial kingdom, there's nothing tangible at it. That I think that can shipwreck someone's faith
Hmm.
because it's kind of like, well, I'm waiting on a physical thing to appear in the sky, and I'm expected to see something. But yeah, when you see that, like maybe there was this time before that really was awesome, like more better than we can imagine, and then it's obviously we're leading up to something that's even obviously surpasses that by you know something
Eternity.
we can't even quantify.
Hmm.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. That I think maybe the thing I got to leave with this is I think it probably is imperative on us to obviously always push that back because I think that some people I think but yeah because preterism has been branded a certain way where obviously full preterism is like this is the new heaven and new earth, it's all here, it's all spiritual and you're just never going to see it, like so people is easily turned off, but we're not saying that. We're actually saying like for one, do not, like God's still offering eternal life. We believe the Bible 100%. We're not denying any bit of it. Actually, we're taking it literally where it's supposed to be taken literal. And but I do think I think you're correct that I think people the I guess the better I think that we have conversations like this where we can get a real our hands around what we actually our best working theory to explain it in a way that's not people are not immediately scared
Hmm.
by because I think that there is that is the worry that people are like he's that means he's not coming back for me. Then I think that like that's what people that's I think that's what people's instant reaction is. He's not coming back for me because this place sucks. And you're like, yeah, this place does suck, but we don't know how long it is. It might it might actually be shorter
Hmm.
than you might not have to wait a 7 year tribulation if things kind of kick off right.
Well,
Mhm.
his word didn't pass away. The gospel
No.
still stands. Salvation's
Yeah,
still there as as an offer for everybody. It never changed. And you know, you have to wonder about the invention of the printing press and all these things in like the Millennial Kingdom. He made sure his word survived into the little season. I don't think he was ever going to disappear. And the basic gospel is it still stands,
Yeah.
whether you're
Yeah.
pre or post. So the hope's still there. Salvation's still a free gift. Take it. You know.
Amen. Amen. You got anything you
Yeah.
want to close with, Vitaly?
Like I said in our other interview, just read the Bible like a clean slate, like a child. You know, the Bible tells you what it's saying. It's not a confusing book at all. And if you think it's confusing, then you've been taught falsely. Read the Bible like a child, like a clean slate, and pray for truth, right? And let God be true and all men liars. So if God says something in the Bible and your first instinct is to think the opposite, question that and ask yourself why. You know, if Jesus said this generation and you're thinking some other generation, ask yourself, why am I thinking this right now? Right.
Yeah.
So I'll just leave you with that. You know, read the Bible like a child, pray, be humble, right? If you're proud, if you're prideful and you think you're right and everything you've been taught is right or what you've learned is right, God will reject you because God rejects the proud and he embraces the humble, right? He shows
Amen.
grace. So that's all it takes is just humility.
Yeah.
That's
Amen.
all.
Yeah.
That's all
Go
you,
ahead.
that's it. Yeah.
Oh, I was gonna say is like yeah. So if you guys are going down this rabbit hole with us, let your research be the strongest in the word. Because, like I said, I think that to me that's our strongest case that we are where we are.
Mhm.
What Jesus, the words of Jesus, and again, I think that's what people are saying. It's like when Jesus is speaking to somebody, just remember he's speaking to them. It doesn't mean you can't get anything out of it, but he's most specifically talking to the people he's talking to. So just remember that when you read what he says.
Yep.
Paul, final words.
You've said everything that needs to be said.
All right. Well, this was a blast, and obviously, I'd love to do this again. Obviously, as the deeper we go, I hope you guys enjoyed this. Obviously, if you haven't followed Alpha Talks and Understanding Conspiracy, you probably already have. I hope you have. Do that right now, and yeah, I appreciate you guys. God bless y'all.
God bless.
Awesome. Good seeing you guys.
See you again, guys.
Later.
All right, man. I think that went well.